client feedback email glowed on my main monitor, a monument to passive-aggressive bullshit. Let's make the logo pop a bit more, Mike. Something with more synergy. I took a slow breath, the air in my apartment tasting stale, and pushed my chair back with a groan. Synergy. I'd been a graphic designer for 6 years, and I was convinced synergy was just a corporate code word for, I have no idea what I want, but I'll know it when I see it, so keep slaving away for free. Rain lashed against the 17th floor window, the city lights of Chicago bleeding into a blurry watercolor of red and gold. My apartment was my fortress. Small, efficient, and blessedly empty. The low hum of my computer was the only company I needed, most of the time. A new package sat on the corner of my desk, a cardboard box with a smudged shipping label, the used drawing tablet I'd snagged off some eBay equivalent. My old Wacom was dying a slow, painful death, and I couldn't afford a new one until this synergy-loving client paid up. I tore the box open. The tablet was inside, a sleek black slate, thinner than I expected. Looked almost new, except for a tiny, almost invisible scratch near the charging port. A bargain. I unplugged my old tablet and plugged the new one in. The USB-C connector clicked into place. For a fraction of a second, the tablet screen didn't come to life with a brand logo. It flashed a chaotic scramble of what looked like garbled code, a white noise blizzard of text and symbols. It was gone as fast as it appeared, replaced by the standard, reassuring glow of the manufacturer's welcome screen. I squinted. What was that? A boot-up error? Secondhand crap, I muttered, shaking my head. You get what you pay for. I dismissed it, turning my attention back to the glowing logo on my monitor that refused to pop. I spent the next hour nudging pixels, changing hues, and hating every second of it. I was in the zone, that numb state of focus that comes with tedious work, when a sound cut through the hum of my computer. Music. It was a piano. A slow, simple melody, full of wrong notes and hesitations. It sounded sad, like a child trying to play a song they only half remembered at a funeral. It was coming from my smart speaker on the kitchen counter. I stopped moving the mouse. I hadn't said the wake word. I hadn't cast anything from my phone. My phone was screened down on the desk beside me. Hey, Volux, I called out, my voice a little louder than necessary. Stop music! The piano stopped instantly. The silence rushed back in, feeling heavier than before. I leaned back in my chair, frowning. I picked up my phone, opened the Volux app, and checked the activity history. Nothing. No record of any command, no history of the song. It was as if it never happened. Weird glitch, I said to the empty room. Annoyance was starting to bubble in my chest. First the tablet, now this. All my tech was staging a revolt tonight. I got up, walked to the kitchen counter, and yanked the speaker's power cord from the wall. Problem solved. I sat back down at my desk. As my eyes readjusted to the monitor's glow, the new tablet suddenly, violently, ramped up its brightness. It went from a comfortable 50% to a searing pure white maximum in a heartbeat. I flinched back, hands flying up to shield my eyes as a blue afterimage was burned into my vision. Jesus Christ! I blinked, spots swimming in front of me. I squinted at the tablet. It was just a blank white screen now, blazing like a miniature sun on my desk. I reached for my mouse, navigated the cursor over to the display settings. I grabbed the brightness slider for the tablet screen and tried to drag it down. It wouldn't move. The slider was frozen, locked at 100%. I clicked and dragged again. Nothing. It was completely unresponsive. A knot of frustration tightened in my stomach. This was more than a glitch. This was broken. And then the lights in my living room began to flicker. It wasn't random. It wasn't the faltering of a dying bulb. They were pulsing. A slow, rhythmic on-off, on-off. My heart hammered against my ribs once, then twice. It was the same rhythm, the same hesitant, limping tempo as the piano music from the speaker I had just unplugged. No, I whispered. No way. My head snapped around the room, the main overhead light, the floor lamp in the corner, even the small LED strip behind my monitor, all of them, pulsing in perfect, silent unison. My breath hitched. This isn't a glitch. This is not a glitch. The TV across the room clicked on by itself. The 55-inch screen, black and inert a second ago, flooded the room with blue light. It wasn't cable. It wasn't Netflix. It was the HDMI input screen. And in the center of it, in crisp 4K, was a perfect mirror of my new tablet's desktop, an empty canvas. My blood went cold. I stared, my mind refusing to connect the dots. The tablet was connected to my computer. My computer wasn't connected to the TV. It was a smart TV, sure, but I never used the casting feature. I didn't even have it set up. Every screen. It was controlling every screen, every light. A wave of pure, cold panic washed over me. This wasn't a broken piece of hardware. I wasn't being hacked by some kid in his mom's basement. This felt different. This felt coordinated. It felt like something was in my apartment, in my network, in my devices. My hands were shaking. I had to regain control. I looked at the nest of wires under my desk. The power strip. Kill the source. That was the only thought in my head. Kill. The hen. Source. I shoved my chair back so hard it slammed into the wall. I scrambled on my hands and knees, my heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against the pulsing lights. The air was thick, electric. I could feel it on my skin, a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards. I fumbled through the spaghetti of cables, my fingers closing around the thick power cord of the tablet. This was it. This had to be it. I gripped it tight and pulled. The instant my fingers touched the plug, every light in the apartment went out. The TV clicked off. My computer monitors went black. The entire building's power could have gone out for all I knew. Everything just stopped. The sudden plunge into darkness was a physical blow. The silence was a crushing weight. The only sounds left were the rain against the window and the frantic animal drumming of my own heart in my ears. I was on the floor, crouched in the dark, clutching a useless plug in my hand. I held my breath, listening. There was nothing. No hum. No flicker. Just the dark. The deep, absolute dark of a high-rise with no power. Minutes could have passed. Or seconds. I couldn't tell. I stayed frozen, every nerve ending screaming, waiting for the next move, waiting for the sound that would tell me I wasn't alone. Then a single, soft flash of light from my desk. I flinched so hard I think I pulled a muscle in my neck. My eyes locked onto the source. The tablet. It was impossible. It was unplugged. Its cord was still in my hand, but its screen lit up one more time. It wasn't the brilliant, searing white from before. It was a dim, sickly gray light, just bright enough to read the single word that had been scrawled across its center. The font was jagged, uneven, like a child's crayon drawing or a message scratched into a wall with a rock. It said, "Wrong," and then the screen went dark, leaving me alone in the crushing silence. The afterimage of that single, impossible word burned forever onto the back of my eyes. I slept in my clothes, woke up on the couch with a crick in my neck and the gray morning light filtering through the blinds. For a long moment, I didn't remember. Then it came back in a rush. The pulsing lights, the unplugged tablet, the single, jagged word, wrong. My eyes snapped to the desk. The tablet was there, dark and inert. The power cord I'd yanked from the wall was still lying on the floor. A power surge. I said the words out loud to the empty apartment. It was a citywide power surge, a massive one, frying some circuits in my cheap, second-hand gear. It was the only explanation that made any sense, the only one that would let me function. The alternative was unthinkable. I got up, my joints popping in protest. The air was stale. I needed coffee. Badly. In the kitchen, I went through the motions. Scoop the grounds, fill the machine with water, press the button. The gurgle of the coffee maker was a normal sound, a good sound. I leaned against the counter, waiting, and ran a hand through my messy hair. Fucking eBay knockoffs, I muttered. Gonna leave the seller a 1-star review from hell. It felt good to have someone to blame, some faceless vendor in another state. Not some thing. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up. An email. The sender was a jumble of letters and numbers, a random string of characters that screamed spam. But the subject line caught my eye. Did you have fun last night? A little knot of ice formed in my gut. I stared at it. It was just a coincidence. Phishing spam. They send out millions of these with vague, alarming subjects to get you to click. That's all it was. I held my thumb over the delete button, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I jabbed the screen. Gone. Just spam. I took a breath. The coffee maker sputtered its last, filling the kitchen with a rich, dark smell. Normal. Everything was normal. I poured the black liquid into my favorite mug, the one with the cracked handle. I needed the caffeine. I needed to get back to work and forget the entire goddamn night. My phone buzzed again. Not an email this time. A text message. From an unknown number. My hand was shaking a little as I tapped the notification. The message was one short line. Don't delete my mail. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the tile floor. My blood ran cold. No, this wasn't happening. It couldn't be. I bent down slowly, my eyes locked on the phone screen. Beneath the text message was a new bubble. An image attachment. It was still loading. A circle, spinning. Then it resolved. It was a picture. A picture of my hand. My hand holding my coffee mug with the cracked handle. The steam was still rising from the black coffee. My chipped thumbnail was in perfect focus. The picture was taken from above. From a high angle. Like someone was standing on top of my kitchen cabinets pointing a camera down at me. Right now. The coffee mug slipped from my other hand. It didn't break. It hit the floor with a dull thud, splashing hot coffee across my bare feet and the white tile. I barely felt the burn. My head snapped up. I scanned the tops of the cabinets, the corners of the ceiling, the vent for the air conditioning. Nothing. There was nothing there. Just smooth, white drywall. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. My gaze darted around the apartment. The living room. The hallway to my bedroom. The front door, still chained and dead-bolted from last night. Who took that picture? Whoa! How did they take that picture? Woohoo! My mind raced, scrambling for a rational thought and finding none. My phone. My phone was hacked. They hacked my front-facing camera. But I had been holding it, screen up. The camera had been pointed at the ceiling. The angle was all wrong. It was from above. High above. Then I saw it. On my laptop, sitting on the desk where I'd left it. A tiny green light. The webcam light. It was on. I scrambled from the kitchen, slipping on the spilled coffee. My mind screamed one thing. It's watching me. I lunged for the desk, grabbing a roll of black electrical tape. My fingers were clumsy, shaking too hard to get the end started. I tore at it with my teeth, ripping off a jagged piece and slapping it hard over the tiny lens of the webcam. Covered. Blind. The second the tape made contact, a sound filled the room. A chuckle. It was a low, distorted giggle, full of digital static, like a recording played on a broken speaker. It came from the kitchen counter, from the Volux smart speaker, the same speaker I had unplugged last night, the same speaker whose power cord was still dangling uselessly from the wall socket. I screamed. It wasn't a word, just a raw, animal sound of pure terror. I backed away from the desk, stumbling over my own desk chair, my eyes wide, locked on the dead speaker. My phone. I needed to call the police. 911. Tell them someone was in my apartment, or in my network, or in my head. I didn't care. I just needed help. I snatched the phone off the floor where I had dropped it. My thumb slid across the screen, hitting the emergency call button. I pressed 911 and jammed the phone to my ear. A sound came through the earpiece. Not a ringtone, not a dispatcher's voice, just a busy signal. A steady, monotonous beep. Beep, beep, beep. I tried again. Same thing. Beep, beep, beep. The line was blocked. Or it was never connecting at all. I was on the 17th floor. Cut off. It knew I would try to call. It cut me off before I even could. The feeling of being trapped was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. My eyes darted to the front door. The chain. The deadbolt. Could I make it? Run for the stairs? But the picture. The giggle. It wasn't outside. It was in here with me. It was everywhere. Then the TV across the room clicked on. It flooded the dim apartment with a harsh blue-white light. I flinched, throwing an arm over my eyes. It wasn't cable news or a movie. It was a screen mirror. It was showing a direct feed, It was showing the view from my laptop's webcam. I saw my desk. I saw my monitor. I saw the black piece of electrical tape I had just slapped over the lens. But the image wasn't black. It was a perfectly clear, high-definition view of my desk. The tape had done nothing. It was seeing right through it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner beating against its cage. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could only watch the screen, watch this impossible violation. Then, on the TV screen, in the middle of the image of my desk, a cursor appeared. It blinked once, twice. A chat box opened in the corner of the screen. Letters began to appear, typed out one by an invisible hand. TAPEISUSELESS. Tape is useless. A wave of white-hot rage erupted through the fear. It was a pure, primal instinct. A cornered animal lashing out. I wouldn't be toyed with. Not like this. Not in my own home. Fuck you! I roared at the screens, at the room, at the thing that was doing this to me. I grabbed the laptop. My hands closed around the plastic shell. It felt cheap and fragile. It was the source. Just like the tablet last night. Kill the source. I lifted it high over my head, my muscles screaming with adrenaline. For a split second, I saw my own reflection in the dark screen of the TV, my face a twisted mask of fury and terror. And I slammed the laptop down onto the corner of my desk with all my strength. The sound was a sickening crack of plastic and shattering glass. The screen spiderwebbed. The chassis split open. I lifted it and slammed it down again. And again. Pieces of black plastic and silver components flew across the room. I kept smashing it, grunting with the effort, until it was nothing but a broken, twisted wreck of wires and circuits. I threw the carcass of the laptop against the wall and stood there, panting. My chest heaved. My knuckles were bleeding. The TV screen had gone black. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breaths echoing in the stillness. I did it. I destroyed it. I killed it. Silence. Blessed silence. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down, my blood turned to ice water. It was another message from the same unknown number. There was no text this time, just a video file. It had already downloaded, it was playing on a loop, it was a short, silent clip. It showed me from behind, it showed my back, my shoulders tense. It showed me raising the laptop above my head, it showed me smashing the laptop on the desk, over and over. The video had been filmed from the other side of my living room, from somewhere near the window, from inside the apartment, from right behind me. My back was to the room, my back was to the window. The video on my phone proved it. Something had stood there, right behind me, and filmed me. My hand holding the phone trembled, the chilling little loop playing again and again. Me, from behind. The swing of the laptop. The smash. Over and over. A silent film of my own terror. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My feet were cemented to the floor, my neck locked in place. If I turned, I would see it. I knew I would. It was there, in the corner by the window. Waiting. Watching. I could feel its gaze on my shoulder blades, a physical weight, cold and heavy. Breathe. I had to breathe. My lungs burned for air, but pulling it in felt like a mistake. Sound was a mistake. Movement was a mistake. My only option was to shrink, to become so small and quiet that maybe it would think I was just part of the furniture. My eyes stared down at the phone screen, at the video of the thing that was behind me. A loop of a ghost. My mind, a desperate animal in a cage, raced for an out. Not the door, not the window. I was on the 17th floor. The hallway was a death trap. I needed a voice. A human voice. Someone on the outside who could confirm I wasn't losing my mind. Someone who could call for help when I couldn't. Koa. His name was a flash of light in the darkness. My best friend. My tether to reality. My thumb, shaking violently, slid across the screen, fumbling out of the video and into my contacts. I jabbed his name. The phone started dialing. I pressed it to my ear, my whole body tensed, listening for the ring, listening for any sound from the room behind me. The phone felt slick with sweat. 1 ring. 2. An eternity passed between each one. The silence in the apartment was absolute, broken only by my ragged breathing into the receiver. Hello? Koa's voice. Normal. Annoyed. like I had just woken him up. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. "Koa," I whispered, my voice a dry croak. "Koa, thank God." I stumbled backward, away from the window, my eyes still refusing to look, and collapsed into the armchair, facing the smashed remains of my desk. "Alex? What the hell, man?" I heard him rustling around. "It's 7 in the morning. What's wrong?" "He's in here," I gasped, the words tumbling out. "He's in my apartment. Someone is in my apartment right now." A pause. "What are you talking about? Are you drunk?" "No, I'm not drunk. I'm not crazy. The tablet last night, the messages, the picture, it's all real. I just smashed my laptop, and he filmed me. Koa, he filmed me from inside the room. Whoa, slow down. Just hang on." I could hear the skepticism in his voice, the condescending calm of someone dealing with a hysterical friend. "You had a nightmare, or you're stressed. All those late nights trying to meet that deadline, it's messing with your head." "It's not in my head," I shot back, my voice cracking with a mix of fear and frustration. "I'm telling you, I'm not alone in here. It sent me a picture of my own hand. It made the speaker laugh, a horrible broken laugh." I stopped. I was describing it. The sound. The low, distorted giggle, full of digital static. And as I tried to explain it, the line went quiet. Koa wasn't saying anything. "Koa? Are you there?" Silence. Then, through the phone's earpiece, a sound. A chuckle. It was low, distorted, and full of digital static. The exact same sound from the Volux speaker. A perfect imitation. My blood went cold. My gut clenched into a knot of ice. Then, Koa's normal voice cut back in, layered on top of his real laughter. "Dude, you should hear yourself. I got you. I totally got you. It's just an app, man. A voice modulator." I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, unable to process it. My mind was a car crash of emotions, rage, confusion, and a disgusting, shameful sliver of relief. You did this?" I stammered. "All of it? The tablet? The messages?" "Well, yeah, most of it," Koa said, still chuckling. "I got into your network last week. Your password is still password 123, you moron. I was just messing with you, pushing some images to your tablet, sending you some spooky texts. I wanted to see how far I could push it before you called me freaking out. Took you longer than I thought." A hot flush of anger burned through the lingering fear. He thought this was funny. He'd put me through hell for a laugh. "That's not funny, Koa. I thought I was going to die. I smashed my brand new laptop." "Oh shit, for real?" The laughter stopped. "Damn, dude, I didn't think you'd go that far. My bad, seriously. That was too much." He sounded genuinely sorry, but it didn't help. The image of the video, filmed from behind me, flashed in my mind. "What about the video?" I demanded. "The one of me smashing it. How did you get that angle?" "It was from inside the room." There was another short pause. "Video? What video? I didn't send you any video. The last thing I sent was that text about deleting my mail." My relief evaporated. The cold dread seeped back in. "Don't lie to me, Koa." "I'm not lying, man. I swear. I can be a dick, but I wouldn't do that. That's messed up." He sounded serious. Utterly serious. "Okay, look. Joke's over. For real this time. It's done. I'm shutting everything down from my end. See? No more ghosts in the machine." He said the words with a finality that should have been comforting. It should have been the end. The explanation. A cruel prank by an asshole best friend. I could live with that. I could buy a new laptop. I could get over it. I was about to let out the breath I'd been holding for what felt like a lifetime. Then the TV across the room clicked on. It wasn't the harsh blue-white light from before. It was a different feed. Grainy, black and white with a little timestamp in the corner. I recognized it immediately. It was the view from the security camera in the hallway outside my apartment, the one mounted on the ceiling. I could see my own front door, number 17B, stenciled on the wood. The hallway was empty. Clean. Quiet. "Koa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did you do that? Did you just turn on my TV? What? No, I told you I'm done. I'm closing the program right now. His voice on the phone was strained. The sound of frantic clicking came through the receiver. I can't disconnect from your network, Alex. It's not letting me out. My eyes were glued to the screen. The image of my own front door. That? Koa's voice was shaking now. All traces of the prankster were gone. This was real fear. Alex, that's not me. I'm not doing that. We both fell silent, connected only by the open phone line, both staring at screens a city apart. My gaze was locked on the silent, empty hallway. It was just a hallway, just a door. But I couldn't look away. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the moments before a lightning strike. Then, something changed. At the far end of the hall, where it turned a corner toward the elevators, a shape emerged from the shadows. It was a person, tall and thin, dressed in a dark, baggy hoodie and jeans. Their face was hidden by the deep shadow of the hood. They just stood there for a second, motionless. Who is that? I breathed into the phone. I don't know, Koa whispered back, his voice tight with panic. Close the feed, Alex. Just turn the TV off. But I couldn't. My hand wouldn't obey. The figure in the hall took a step. Then another. It was walking toward my door. It wasn't in a hurry. Each step was slow, measured, deliberate. The casual pace of someone who knows you're not going anywhere. The pace of a wolf approaching a tethered lamb. Closer. Closer. The indistinct shape resolved into more detail. The worn-out sneakers. The way their hands were jammed deep into the pockets of the hoodie. It was just a person. A delivery guy. A neighbor. My mind screamed rationalizations at me, but my gut knew better. My gut was a churning pit of acid. The sound of Koa's panicked breathing was a frantic counterpoint to the silent, steady advance on the screen. The figure was halfway down the hall now, 20 feet from my door. 15. 10. It stopped. It stood directly in front of my door, its body perfectly framed in the center of the TV screen. For a long moment, it did nothing. It just stood there, head down, a faceless statue of menace. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the suffocating silence. Then, with an agonizing slowness, the figure tilted its head up. The hood still cast a deep shadow, but I could feel its gaze. It was looking right at the security camera, right at me. It knew. It knew I was watching. A hand slid out from its pocket. It wasn't holding anything. It was just an open hand. It lifted it slowly, up to the level of its hidden face. And it waved. A small, friendly, almost casual wave. A simple gesture that carried more horror than any weapon. It was a wave that said, "Hello, I see you, I'm here." The phone in my hand went dead. Not a click, not static. The line just cut out. Koa was gone. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was total and complete. It was just me. And the thing outside my door. The TV screen was a tombstone. Black, silent, reflecting the wreckage of my desk and the terror on my own face. My phone was a dead brick in my hand. The line wasn't just cut, it was gone. Erased. No dial tone. Nothing. There was only the low hum of the television and the frantic, shallow sound of my own breathing, and the thing outside my door. My first thought wasn't fear. It was white-hot rage, that son of a bitch. That absolute son of a bitch, Koa. This had to be the punchline. He hacks my network, sends a friend over to my building to complete the scare, to be the boogeyman on the camera feed. He had to have a confederate. It was the only explanation. The wave, the casual, friendly wave, was the signature on his masterpiece of a prank. I didn't move. I stayed half-crouched behind the armchair, my body coiled like a spring. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of looking through the peephole. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to wait. I was going to listen until this asshole in the hallway got bored and left, and then I was going to drive to Koa's place and break his jaw. The thought was a small, warm coal in the ice pit of my stomach. My ears strained, trying to separate the sound of blood rushing past my eardrums from the silence of the hallway. The hum of the TV was the only constant. I held my breath. 1 second, 2, 10, there, a sound. Faint, but undeniable, the shuffling scrape of shoes on the thin hallway carpet. It wasn't moving toward the door, it was moving away. Slow, unhurried steps, the same deliberate pace I saw on the screen. The sound grew fainter, fainter. It turned the corner. Gone. Silence. I waited a full minute, counting the seconds in my head, my muscles screaming from the tension. Nothing. No footsteps returning. No knock. No prankster's laugh from the other side of the door. Nothing. Slowly, painfully, I uncoiled myself. My legs were numb, tingling with pins and needles. I rose to my feet, using the armchair for support. The anger was still there, but a layer of cold uncertainty was creeping back in. If it was a prank, it was over. But it didn't feel over. The air in the apartment felt wrong. Stale. Watched. My gaze flickered around the room. The smashed laptop. The dead TV. The window. My God, the window. I had never closed it after the storm last night. It was still cracked open a few inches, a sliver of cold morning air slicing into the room. It suddenly felt like a massive security breach, an open wound in the side of my apartment. I had to check. I had to be sure. My movements were stiff, robotic. I walked to the front door first. My hand trembled as I reached for the deadbolt. It was locked. The chain was still on. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, a wave of dizziness washing over me. Okay. He didn't get in. Whoever it was, they were just outside. But the video of me smashing the laptop, the image flooded my mind again. The angle, from inside the room, from behind me. No, I couldn't think about that. One thing at a time. Secure the perimeter. That's what they always say in the movies. I turned from the door and walked toward the bedroom. My bedroom. My sanctuary. The thought of that room felt violated now, tainted by the picture it had sent me, the one of my hand resting on my own duvet. The bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open. Everything looked normal. Bed unmade, clothes in a heap on a chair. I walked straight to the window, my only goal to slam it shut and lock it, to seal off the outside world. I reached for the metal latch. My fingers brushed against the cold glass, and I froze. There, on the pane of glass, was a handprint. It wasn't on the inside. It was on the outside. A perfect, 5-fingered handprint, pointing downwards, as if someone had been holding on from above. It was smeared with something dark and grimy, greasy and black, like a mixture of old engine oil and grave dirt. The details were sickeningly clear against the pale gray sky. The whorls of the fingerprints. The deep line of the palm. The sheer filth of it. My mind refused to process it for a second. It just registered the image. A handprint. On my window. Then, the context slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. I lived on the 17th floor. There is no ledge. There is no fire escape on this side of the building. There is nothing but 17 stories of sheer brick and glass and a concrete parking lot below. It was impossible. Absolutely, fundamentally impossible. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat, my heel caught on the rug, and I fell backward, landing hard on the floor. My eyes were glued to that impossible print. It wasn't a prank. Koa couldn't do this. No man could do this. This was something else. This was wrong on a level one didn't have words for. The video wasn't a hack. The picture wasn't a Photoshop. It wasn't a joke. It was real. It was in here. Or it could get in here whenever it wanted. Clack! The sound was so loud, so sharp, it was like a gunshot in the silent apartment. My head snapped toward the living room, toward the front door. The brass doorknob was twisting. It twisted violently to the right, as far as it would go, held only by the deadbolt. Then to the left. Back and forth, faster and faster, a frantic metallic rattle that echoed through the entire apartment. Someone was trying to force my lock. A desperate, brutal attempt to get in. I scrambled backward on my hands and feet, crab walking away from my bedroom door, my eyes wide. The rattling stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence again. A heavy, listening silence. Boom! The door shuddered in its frame. The sheer, percussive force of the blow traveled through the floorboards. up my spine. It wasn't someone shouldering the door. It was a kick. A heavy, dead-center kick. Boom! A framed picture fell off the hallway wall, shattering on the floor. Boom! I could hear the wood of the door groaning, splintering. This wasn't a person. It was pure, mindless force. A battering ram of flesh and bone. My mind was a blank screen of static. I couldn't think. I couldn't scream. I could only watch the door, my door, the one flimsy barrier between me and that impossible, relentless violence. I pushed myself into the corner where the sofa met the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. My phone was useless. My laptop was a wreck. There was no one to call. No way out. The window was a 17-story drop. The door was under assault by what? The pounding was a rhythm now, a steady, hateful beat. Boom, 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 boom. It felt like it was inside my own skull, shaking my teeth, rattling my bones. How was no one hearing this? How was the whole floor not awake, calling the cops? Then the thought hit me, colder and sharper than any before. What if they can't hear it? What if this sound is just for me? The final blow came without warning. It wasn't louder, just different. A sharp, explosive crack of splintering wood and popping metal. A small, dark object shot from the center of the door and skittered across the wood floor, coming to a stop near my feet. It was the peephole, ripped clean out. The pounding stopped. In its place was a perfect, dark circle, about an inch in diameter, punched right through the middle of the door, a gaping wound. I held my breath, my entire universe shrinking to that single dark hole. I was still on the floor, propped up against the sofa, exposed. He could see me. Or it could see me. It had to. The light from the living room was spilling into the dark hallway. I was perfectly illuminated. A target. Time stopped. The silence pressed in, heavier and more menacing than the noise had ever been. Then something filled the hole. An eye. It slid into view, dark, wide, and unblinking. The iris was so dark it was almost indistinguishable from the pupil. There was no white visible, just that flat, black circle, framed by the raw, splintered wood of the door. There was no curiosity in it, no anger, no emotion at all. It was the eye of an insect, of something ancient and hungry. It wasn't looking at the room, it was looking at me. It had found me. I think I made a sound then, a wet, pathetic whimper. My bladder threatened to let go. My body was a useless prison of meat and bone, and that eye was the warden. We just stayed like that for what felt like an hour. Me on the floor, paralyzed. The eye in the door, watching. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The black circle was empty again. Silence returned. A silence that was 100 times worse. What was it doing? Was it getting a tool? Was it stepping back for another run at the door? My terror was so complete, it looped back around into a strange, detached curiosity. The animal part of my brain screamed at me to stay put, to play dead. But the human part, the part that just had to know, was stronger. Slowly, carefully, I began to crawl. I moved on my hands and knees, my body shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. Every inch felt like a mile. The floor was gritty under my palms with dust and debris from the assault. I kept my eyes locked on that hole, expecting the eye to reappear at any second. I reached the door. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I pressed my ear to the wood beside the hole. I couldn't hear anything. No breathing, no shuffling, nothing. With a surge of stupid, suicidal bravery, I brought my face to the door. I squeezed one eye shut and peered through the dark, splintered hole. The hallway was empty. The overhead lights cast a generic yellow glow on the patterned carpet. The door to 17A was closed. The door to 17C, further down, was also closed. No one. Nothing. It was just a normal apartment hallway. It was as if the last 5 minutes had never happened. Maybe I had finally snapped. Maybe this was it, the brain aneurysm Co was always joking I'd get from stress. Maybe I was already dead. I pulled back from the hole, my mind reeling. I leaned my full weight against the door, as if my 170 pounds could hold back whatever had just been on the other side. My gaze dropped to the floor. And I saw it. Lying on the hardwood just inside the door was a tiny slip of white, a small, folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there before. It must have been slid under the door while I was crawling, while I was listening. My hand moved on its own. It felt disconnected from my body as I reached down and picked it up. My fingers were numb. The paper felt thin, cheap. I unfolded it. There were 5 words on it, scrawled in a messy, black script, the letters jagged and angry. Why didn't you open the door? The paper felt like a dead insect in my numb fingers. My brain refused to process the words. The jagged black ink that looked like it had been scratched onto the page by a broken nail. Why didn't you open the door? It wasn't a threat. It was an accusation. The question broke something in my head. The careful wall I had built between prank and something else crumbled into dust. This wasn't Koa. This wasn't a random lunatic. The handprint on the 17th floor window. The impossible video. The eye in the door. The pieces didn't fit into any sane puzzle. This was a different logic. A hostile, alien logic. My breath came in ragged, burning bursts. The note. It was here, on my floor. Someone, something, had to have slid it under the door. While I was crawling. While I was frozen in terror. It had been that close. Close enough to touch the door. Close enough to know I was just on the other side. I scrambled backward, away from the door, away from the contaminated slip of paper. My back hit the sofa with a dull thud. This wasn't a game of hacking. This was an invasion. It used technology not as its weapon, but as its voice. And I had been listening. My eyes shot to the TV. The router. The modem with its single, blinking green light. Its connection to the outside world. To it. No more. A surge of desperate, animal energy shot through me. I wasn't prey. Not yet. I launched myself off the floor, a clumsy, frantic movement. I didn't run to the bedroom to hide. I ran to the wall where the coaxial cable snaked out from the plate. I yanked it. The connector dug into my fingers, but I ripped it free from the modem. The green light died. I crawled behind the entertainment center, my hands grabbing the power strip. I tore the plugs from their sockets. TV, modem, router. All of it. The low hum in the apartment vanished, plunging the room into a thicker, more absolute silence. I was untethered, cut off. An island. Just how it wanted me to be? The thought was a spike of ice in my gut. I ignored it. I had to believe I was cutting it off, not myself. My gaze swept the dark room, cataloging every point of light. The glowing clock on the microwave. I stumbled into the kitchen, ripped the plug from the wall. The numbers vanished. My phone was already dead. The laptop was destroyed. What else? What else was connected? My drawing tablet. It was on the small desk against the far wall, where I'd left it 2 nights ago. Its power cable was a black coil on the floor beside it, unplugged. I'd kicked it out by accident, and hadn't bothered to plug it back in. It was a dead slate of black glass. Safe. I retreated. I found the corner again, the one formed by the sofa and the wall, and slid down to the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around my head. I made myself small. A tight ball of terror. The silence was complete now. There was no hum. No traffic from 17 stories below. Only the frantic drumbeat of blood in my own ears. I just had to wait. Wait for the sun to come up. Just wait. Cops? I need cops. The thought was a useless mantra. How? Yell out the window? What if it was out there, clinging to the bricks? I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't look. Don't listen. Just breathe. And then a light bloomed behind my eyelids. A soft, chemical blue. I snapped my eyes open. My heart seized. The drawing tablet. Its screen was on. It glowed with an even, cold blue light in the darkness of my apartment. A lone rectangle of impossible energy. The power cord was still a neat, dark coil on the floorboards beside the desk. It was impossible. It had no power. It was a brick. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only stare as an icon blinked on the screen. The icon for my drawing software. It clicked open on its own. A blank white canvas filled the screen, achingly bright in the gloom. For a moment, nothing happened. It was just a white screen, a dead, silent beacon. Maybe it was a glitch, a final surge from a dying capacitor. My brain clutched at the explanation, a drowning man grabbing at a straw. Then a cursor appeared in the center of the canvas, a small black arrow. It hovered for a second, then shot to the digital toolbox on the side of the screen. It selected the pencil tool. It selected the color black. It moved back to the center of the canvas, and it began to draw. I watched, paralyzed, as lines appeared on the screen. Quick, jagged strokes. There was no sound, but I could almost hear the frantic scratching of a graphite pencil on paper. It was sketching something. A familiar shape. A long rectangle. A smaller one next to it. The vague outline of a cushion. It was my sofa, the one I was cowering behind. The digital pencil moved with a sickening speed, its movements too fast, too certain. It sketched the floor lamp in the corner, the one I'd knocked over. It drew the dark, dead rectangle of the TV screen. It was drawing my living room. It was drawing the room from the perspective of the desk it was sitting on. My breath hitched in my throat. My entire body was trembling. A violent, uncontrollable shudder. The thing in the hallway, the eye in the door. It wasn't outside anymore. It was inside. It was here. It was seeing this. The frenetic sketching continued. It filled in details. The shattered picture frame on the floor. The cord I'd ripped from the wall, lying like a dead snake on the carpet. It was a perfect, manic replica of my wrecked apartment. Then the pencil moved to the corner of the drawing, the corner where the sofa met the wall. It began to sketch a new shape there, a hunched-over form, a curved line for a back. 2 lines for arms, wrapped around 2 more for legs pulled up to a chest. A circle for a head, buried in the arms. It was drawing me. It was drawing me right now, in my corner, in my pathetic ball of fear. The pencil stopped. The drawing was complete, a perfect, terrible snapshot of this exact moment. Then the cursor moved again. It moved slowly, deliberately, to a spot on the canvas just behind the head of my sketched figure. It drew a line, a long, vertical line. Then another beside it. It was drawing a figure, standing, looming over my cowering form in the picture. It drew a simple, round head with no features, long, straight arms that hung down at its sides. It was tall, too tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling in the sketch. A sound tore from my throat, a choked, wet gag that was half scream, half sob. I threw myself away from the corner, spinning around, my back slamming hard against the fabric of the sofa. My eyes raked the empty space where the figure in the drawing should have been. Nothing. There was nothing there, just the pale wall, the bookshelf, the shadows. The air was still, empty. A wave of dizzying vertigo washed over me. I pressed my hands against my eyes, my fingers digging into my skull. It's not real. It's a hallucination. The stress. The fear. My mind is breaking. That's all it is. My mind is broken. I had to look again. I had to prove it was a lie. Slowly, shakily, I lowered my hands. My gaze, against my will, was dragged back to the single point of light in the room. Back to the tablet. The drawing was gone. The canvas was white again, wiped clean. My relief lasted for half a heartbeat. Because the cursor was moving again. It wasn't frantic this time. It moved with a slow, calm deliberation. It drew a single large rectangle, then a smaller rectangle inside it. It sketched 2 vertical lines, close together, running down the middle of the inner rectangle. I knew what it was. The lines of a bifold door. The knob, the slight shadow at the edge. It was my bedroom closet. The digital pencil added one last detail. A sliver of black. A dark, empty gap between the 2 doors. as if the closet had been left slightly ajar. It stopped. The finished drawing just sat there on the screen, a silent, minimalist horror. The closet in my bedroom. The door, open just a crack. It was an instruction, a destination, a taunt. The game of cat and mouse had a new location. It wanted me to go there. It wanted me to look. My eyes were glued to the image. My mind a howl of white noise. Why? Why the closet? I looked from the glowing screen toward the dark hallway that led to my bedroom, to the real closet. As my eyes adjusted to the deep dark, my gaze dropped back to the tablet screen. New marks were appearing below the drawing of the closet. Not a sketch. Letters. The cursor was writing. The script was the same as the note. A jagged, angry scrawl, traced by an invisible, hateful hand. One word at a time. The letters trembled as they formed. It's in. Here. The words hung on the screen, a digital scar carved into the darkness. It's in here. Not a threat. A promise. My mind refused to move. It was locked on a single, impossible loop. The drawing. The closet. The words. A part of my brain, the logical part that was now screaming under a pile of rubble, tried to form an explanation. Gas leak. Mold. Some kind of psychotropic agent pumped through the vents. I was hallucinating. That had to be it. My brain was eating itself from the inside out. The thought was a life raft. I grabbed it. Air. I needed fresh air. I couldn't look down the dark hallway that led to the bedroom, to the real closet. Looking would make it real. Instead, I pushed myself up, my legs shaking like a newborn deer's. My body moved without my permission, a puppet pulled by the strings of pure animal instinct. It stumbled away from the tablet, away from the glowing poison of its message, and lurched toward the sliding glass door of the balcony. The lock was stiff. My fumbling, sweaty fingers struggled with the catch. It finally gave with a loud snap that echoed in the dead silence of the apartment. I slid the heavy glass door open. A rush of cold night air hit me like a slap. It smelled of rain and exhaust from the street 17 stories below. I leaned against the frame, my head hanging out into the abyss, and sucked in a huge, ragged breath. Then another, and another. My head swam. Gas leak. It felt plausible now. The air in here was thick, used up. The air out here was clean. Real. I just needed to clear my head. Wait it out. Just wait for the sun. My dead phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out. A useless brick. Power. I needed power. My eyes scanned the living room. Everything was ripped from the walls. Except my laptop bag was still by the door from when I came in yesterday. The portable power bank. I moved back inside, my feet avoiding the spot on the floor where the note had been. I found the bag, unzipped it with trembling hands, and pulled out the power bank. The indicator light showed it was almost full. I plugged in the phone. The screen flickered to life. The Apple logo appeared. My heart hammered against my ribs with a frantic, hopeful beat. Cops. Leo. Anyone. The phone booted up. The screen lit with a dozen missed call notifications. All from Leo. As if on cue, the screen lit up again. Leo. Incoming call. I answered it so fast, I almost dropped the phone. Leo. Matt. Jesus Christ, man, what the hell is going on? I've been calling you for an hour. His voice was a frantic buzz in my ear, stripped of its usual laid-back, joking tone. He was scared. Leo, listen to me, I said, my voice a raw whisper. Someone's in my apartment. The words sounded insane even as I said them. What? No, Matt, listen. It's the tablet. The tablet I sold you. What about it? I snapped, my eyes darting toward the desk in the darkness. I got a weird feeling after I talked to you. You sounded off. So I went back through my old emails, trying to find the guy that first bought it from. It wasn't a guy. It was a girl. I found her. A cold spike of dread pierced through my panic. What about her? Her name was Amy Chen. She was an artist. I found her Facebook page, man. You need to see it. My free hand was clenched into a white-knuckled fist. Send it to me. I'm sending it now. Matt, be careful. The stuff she was posting right before she went silent, it sounds a lot like what you were talking about. The phone buzzed. A text message. A single blue link. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. What happened to her, Leo? I asked, but he had already hung up. I tapped the link. The Facebook profile loaded. The profile picture was of a young woman, maybe late 20s, with bright eyes and a splash of paint on her cheek. She was smiling, holding up a drawing tablet. My tablet. Her name was right there. Amy Chen. I started scrolling down her timeline. The top posts were normal. Pictures of her art, links to articles, photos with friends in a bar. It all felt so alive. I kept scrolling, going back weeks. Then the tone started to change. October 14th. Weirdest thing. Swear I left my keys on the hook by the door. Found them in the bathroom this morning. I need more sleep. My blood went cold. That was the first thing. The small displacement, the thing you blame on yourself. October 19th. Does anyone else in the building hear scratching sounds at night? Like inside the walls? Starting to creep me out. I scrolled faster. My thumb was slick with sweat. October 26th. Okay, not funny. My drawing tablet turned on by itself last night. Woke me up. Must be some kind of power surge. I stopped breathing. The same fucking tablet. The one sitting on my desk right now. My eyes shot over to it. The screen was dark again. Waiting. November 2nd. I feel like I'm being watched. Even when I'm alone in my apartment. I keep seeing things out of the corner of my eye. I'm losing my mind. The last post was a photo. It was grainy, taken in low light. It was a picture of her apartment door from the inside. A dark wooden door with a small brass peephole. In the corner of the picture you could see a piece of mail on the floor that had been slid under the door, and on the door, in brass numerals, was the number. 1708. No fucking way. The phone almost slipped from my hand. I scrambled to the front door of my apartment, fumbling for the light switch. The entryway was flooded with yellow light. I stared at my own door. The same dark wood. The same brass peephole. The same number screwed into the center. 1708. I wasn't just in the same building. I was in her apartment. I was standing in her goddamn home. A wave of nausea washed over me. The air wasn't safe. The walls weren't safe. This whole place, it was a tomb. I was living in a tomb. The phone buzzed again, violently, in my hand. Another text from Leo. Another link. This one wasn't a Facebook page. It was a link to a local news site. The raw fear in my gut turned into a block of ice. I knew what it was going to say before I even clicked it. My thumb, moving on its own, tapped the screen. The page loaded. The headline hit me like a physical blow. Young painter brutally murdered in high-rise apartment. Killer remains at large. November 10th. My mind raced. I moved in December. The place had been empty for a month. Deep cleaned, the realtor had said. A good deal because the previous tenant broke their lease. Broke their fucking lease. My eyes fell on the picture in the article. It was taken by the police. A wide-angle shot of a crime scene. Yellow tape was stretched across a doorway. The room was a wreck. An overturned floor lamp. A shattered picture frame on the floor. A dark, dead TV screen. It was my living room. It was a picture of the exact room I was standing in right now. Only it was a photograph from a nightmare. And there, on the floor, right in front of the sofa where I had been cowering just minutes ago, there was a dark, ugly stain on the beige carpet. A stain that went deep into the fibers. I looked down from the phone to the floor, right at my feet. The stain was gone. They had replaced the carpet, but I knew exactly where it had been. I was standing on it. This whole time, I thought it was a hacker, a stalker. I thought I was the target. The thought was laughable now. I wasn't the target. I was just the idiot who had moved into the crosshairs. The threat wasn't in the tablet. The tablet was just a microphone for the house itself. It wasn't some random entity. It was her. It wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to tell me something. The eye in the peephole. The note. Why didn't you open the door? It wasn't an accusation against me. It was a memory. The killer had been at her door. The closet. It's in here. She wasn't telling me a monster was in the closet. She was telling me where she hid. Or where he hid. Or where they found her. A light bloomed in the corner of my vision. Soft. Blue. I turned my head slowly, a mechanical movement of gears grinding in my neck. The drawing tablet. Its screen was on. It wasn't a blank canvas this time. A picture was already there, fully formed. It was a self-portrait of Amy Chen, the same face from her profile picture. But this was a detailed, beautiful painting. Her eyes were bright, artistic, full of life. It was stunning. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Then, as I watched, something happened. A single pixel in her right eye turned red. Then another. A thin red line started to snake its way down from the corner of her eye in the painting. It crawled down her digital cheek. Another line appeared from the other eye. They looked like bloody tears, impossibly vivid against the pale skin of the portrait. The red streaks multiplied, ran together, dripping from her chin onto her shirt in the painting, staining it a deep crimson. The beautiful portrait was melting into a gory nightmare right before my eyes. Her bright, lively eyes suddenly looked hollow, pleading. Then the cursor appeared. It moved to the space below the weeping, bloody portrait. It began to write. The same jagged, angry script from the note. One final message. Not a clue, not a warning, a plea. Save me! Save me! The words burned on the screen, blue light against a bloody canvas, a plea from a dead woman. My brain stalled, the gears locked. All the frantic energy, the adrenaline that had sent me scrambling around the apartment, just evaporated. It left a vacuum, a quiet, cold space in my head where terror used to be. The killer remains at large. The headline from the news article. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a rogue AI. It was Amy. Amy Chen. Her ghost. Trapped in the machine she used to create art. Trapped in the walls of her own tomb. This apartment. My apartment. The things that had happened. They weren't attacks. They were echoes. Memories of her last moments, bleeding through the veil. The eye in the peephole. Why didn't you open the door? Her killer had been outside. The drawing in the closet. It's in here. That's where she hid. Or where he found her. Every flicker of the lights, every terrifying message was a desperate, garbled scream for help from the other side. And I had been screaming back, thinking it was trying to hurt me. A wave of something other than fear washed over me. It was cold and heavy. Guilt. Pity. I looked at the weeping portrait on the tablet, at the horrifying plea beneath it. I was standing on the spot where she died. I was sleeping in the room where she was murdered. I was living inside her nightmare. My throat was dry. I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. I swallowed, forcing moisture that wasn't there. Amy? The word was a puff of air in the dead room, a whisper. The screen on the tablet changed instantly. The bloody portrait vanished. The plea vanished. The screen flickered, then resolved into a new image. It wasn't a drawing. It was a video feed, grainy, low resolution. The colors were washed out under a harsh fluorescent light. It was a wide-angle shot, looking down a long, sterile hallway. Beige walls, a scuffed floor. At the far end, a set of brushed metal doors. The elevator. My blood ran cold again, but this time it was different. This wasn't a memory. This was live. My eyes darted from the tablet to my front door. The tablet was showing me the hallway right outside my apartment. Right now. How? Who was filming? Was it my smart doorbell? No, I'd ripped that off the wall hours ago. This was a different angle, higher up, like a security camera. My focus snapped back to the screen, to the metal doors. They were closed. The small, circular button next to them was dark. The hallway was empty. For one long, stretched-out second, there was nothing. Just the quiet hum from the tablet's speakers. Then, the button next to the elevator doors lit up. A bright, clean circle of light. Someone had called the elevator. To my floor. My heart started up again, a heavy, pounding drum against my ribs. Fight or flight. The switch in my brain flipped. This wasn't a ghost story anymore. This was real. This was happening. On the screen, a number above the elevator doors glowed red. 1. It changed. 5. 10. 12. 16. Ding! The sound was faint through the tablet's tiny speaker, but I felt it in my bones. It was the same chime I heard a dozen times a day. Familiar. Mundane. Now it was the sound of a guillotine dropping. The metal doors slid open. A figure stepped out. The image was too grainy to make out a face, but I didn't need to. The shape was all wrong. Bulky. A dark hoodie pulled up, shadowing the head. The same figure from the security footage I had watched on this very tablet. The footage of the man following me home. Her killer. He wasn't an echo. He wasn't a memory. He was here. He turned, his movements casual, and started walking down the hall. Toward my apartment. Toward apartment 1708. No, no, no. The words stumbled out of my mouth. My body moved. Pure instinct. No thought, just a desperate need for escape. I wasn't just in her apartment. I was in her last moments. I was playing her part. And I refused to meet her end. I spun around and lunged for the front door. My hand slapped against the wood, fumbling for the deadbolt. My fingers closed around the cold metal knob. Beep. A sharp electronic sound. A small red light blinked on the smart lock I'd been so proud of when I installed it. A calm, synthesized female voice spoke from the lock itself. System error. Lock engaged. What? I twisted the deadbolt. It didn't budge. It was frozen solid. I threw my shoulder against the door. It was like hitting a brick wall. Panic, sharp and acidic, shot up my throat. I hammered on the door with my fist. Open! Open the fucking door! System error. Lock engaged. The voice was maddeningly calm. I turned back, my eyes wild, and looked at the tablet. The screen was still showing the hallway. The man was closer now, just a few doors down. He was walking slowly, deliberately. No rush. He knew I was in here. Amy. She was doing this. She had locked me in. Why? Why would she trap me in here with him? Was this revenge? Was she angry I hadn't understood? E something the tablet. Save me. The words echoed in my head. Maybe this wasn't a trap. Maybe it was a cage. For him. Maybe she needed me to do what no one else could. Finish it. The thought was insane. I was no hero. I was a programmer. My hands were soft. My biggest fight was with a stubborn line of code. My eyes swept the room, looking for a weapon. A lamp. A heavy book. Useless. My mind was a blank slate of white noise and terror. Then I heard it. A sound from the other side of the door. Not a knock. Not a footstep. A delicate, metallic sound. Jingle. The sound of keys. Then a sound that ended everything. A sound that made the world stop. Click. The tiny, precise sound of a key sliding into my lock. My smart lock. The one that was supposed to be unpickable. The one that used my phone. He had a key. He had a fucking key to my apartment. I stumbled backward, away from the door, my legs tripping over themselves. My back hit the wall with a hard thud. I slid down to the floor, my eyes locked on the doorknob. Scrape. C-H click. The deadbolt unlocked. The calm female voice from the lock was silent. The doorknob began to turn. Slowly, my breath hitched. My entire world narrowed to that small brass knob. Time stretched, pulling like taffy. Every cell in my body screamed. Run. Hide. Fight. I did none of them. I was paralyzed, pinned to the spot by a force older than fear. I was a spectator at my own execution. The door swung inward. He stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the harsh light of the hall. He was just a man, not a monster. He wore a dark gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. His face was hidden in the deep shadow of the hood. He took one step inside, his sneakers making no sound on the hardwood floor. He let the door swing shut behind him, plunging the entryway back into darkness, leaving us in the gloom of the living room, lit only by the city lights from the balcony and the single ghostly blue glow from the tablet on my desk. This was it, the final frame of the movie. My heart hammered, a frantic trapped bird against my ribs. I waited for him to lunge, to pull out a knife, a gun. But he didn't. He didn't even look at me. I was a piece of furniture, a coat rack, an irrelevant detail in the room. His head, still cowled in shadow, slowly scanned the apartment. His movements were calm, methodical, like he was looking for something he'd misplaced. His hidden gaze passed over the overturned lamp, the couch I had hidden behind, the empty space where the rug used to be. He took another step into the room. Then, another. He wasn't looking for me. His focus, his entire presence, was aimed at the desk, at the small, glowing rectangle of blue light. He stopped, standing right over the spot where Amy Chen's body had been found. He stood there for a long moment, perfectly still. I held my breath, the air burning in my lungs. Then a low sound rumbled from deep in his chest. A chuckle. It was a dry, ugly sound, the sound of a cracked tombstone. He reached up with one hand and slowly pulled back his hood. His face was pale, unremarkable. Thin lips, a sharp nose. But his eyes were dark, and they shone with a feverish, obsessive light. They were fixed, with a terrifying intensity, on the glowing screen. He ignored me completely, as if I didn't exist. He spoke, his voice a low, raspy whisper that cut through the silence of the room. It wasn't directed at me. It was directed at the device on the desk. There you are. He smiled, a thin, cruel slash across his face. Finally found you. I was on the floor, my back against the wall. He was in my apartment. My mind was a flat line, a dead signal. The part of the brain that tells you to run, to scream, to fight, had shorted out. All I could do was watch. He was a cancer that had metastasized from the hallway into my living room. The door was closed behind him. We were sealed in. He didn't look at me. It was the most terrifying thing he could have done. I was nothing, a lamp, a stain on the floor. My terror, my very existence, didn't register. His head turned, hidden inside the deep cowl of his hoodie. His gaze swept the room. It wasn't the frantic search of a burglar. It was slow, methodical. An appraisal. He was looking for something specific. His unseen eyes passed over my cowering form without a flicker of interest. My heart hammered against my ribs, a useless drumbeat in the awful quiet. He took a step, then another. His sneakers were silent on the wood floor. He moved toward the desk, toward the single point of light in the room, the blue glow from the tablet. He stopped directly over the spot where the police outline had been, the spot where Amy Chen had bled out. He stood there, a statue carved from shadow. I stopped breathing. The air in my lungs turned to poison. A sound broke the silence, a low rumble from his chest, a chuckle. It was a horrible sound, like stones grinding together. Dry. Dead. He reached up with a gloved hand and pushed back his hood. His face was a shock of mediocrity. Pale skin, thin lips, a nose that was just a nose. He could have been anyone. The guy in line at the grocery store. The man in the elevator. But his eyes were black holes, burning with a light that was all wrong. They were locked on the tablet with a heat that felt physical. He was ignoring me. He was staring past me. At her. He spoke. His voice was a rasp, a fingernail scraping across concrete. The words weren't for me. They were for the glowing screen on my desk. There you are. A smile stretched his thin lips. It was the cruelest thing I had ever seen. Thought you could hide from me, he whispered. In the wires? In the code? Clever. But not clever enough? I didn't understand. What was he talking about? My mind, sluggish with fear, tried to connect the dots. The tablet, the drawings, her ghost in the machine. He wasn't here for me, he was here for her. As if in answer, a new sound entered the room. It came from the tablet's speakers. A faint hiss, the sound of an untuned radio. S S S S S S S S S S S S S S's. The man's smile tightened. He took a step closer to the desk. Still trying to fight? Even now? There's nothing left, Amy. Just static. Just echoes. The hissing grew louder. It wasn't just static anymore. It had a texture. A rhythm. It sounded angry. The blue light from the tablet screen began to pulse, getting brighter, then dimmer, in time with the angry sound. SS's, SH, HHH, HHHHHHH, SSSSSS. The man flinched. He put a hand to his temple, as if the sound was a physical pressure. Shut up, he hissed. You're just data. You're just a memory. You're dead. The sound from the speakers escalated into a sharp, piercing shriek. A digital scream that scraped at the inside of my skull. The man clapped his hands over his ears, a grimace of real pain twisting his face. I said, "Shut up," he roared. And then the room went insane. The lamp on the end table didn't just flicker. The bulb exploded with a loud pop, showering the corner in darkness and tiny shards of glass. The smart speaker on my kitchen counter suddenly blared, not music, but the same high-pitched static from the tablet, amplified 100 times. Every light in the apartment began to flash. On, off, a strobe effect that turned the room into a series of jagged, nightmarish photographs. In one flash, the man was staggering, hands over his ears. In the next, he was kicking over a chair. The entire apartment hummed with a low, vibrating energy that I could feel in my teeth. The small objects on my desk began to tremble. A pen rattled against a coffee mug. The mug slid, inch by inch, toward the edge. It teetered for a second, then fell, shattering on the floor. He was right. She wasn't just a memory. She was here. She was the whole damn apartment. And she was furious. From the kitchen came a sound that made me jump. A single, sharp crack. Then another. Crack. Smash. I glanced toward the doorway and saw a plate leap from the drying rack and explode against the far wall. A glass followed. Then another. It was a hailstorm of ceramic and glass. A poltergeist tantrum of pure rage. The killer was in the center of it all. The target. He stumbled back from the desk, his head whipping around as the room tore itself apart around him. He looked like a cornered animal. His confidence was gone, replaced by a frantic, sweating panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was trapped in here with her, and I was trapped with both of them. His wild eyes finally landed on me, cowering by the door. But there was no recognition, just rage. He needed it to stop. He needed to be in control. His eyes darted back to the source, the screaming, pulsing tablet on the desk. "You bitch," he snarled, his voice barely audible over the sonic assault. "You dead digital bitch!" He lunged forward, no longer toward the desk, but toward his own jacket, which he dropped by the door. He ripped it open. His hand came out, holding something dark. For a second, I thought it was a gun. My blood went cold. But it wasn't a gun. It was a knife. A combat knife with a thick, serrated blade. The glint of the flashing lights on the steel was the last thing I wanted to see. He wasn't going for me. In that single, blinding moment of clarity, I finally understood. The tablet wasn't just evidence. It was her. Her consciousness. Her soul. He hadn't just come back to destroy a piece of technology. He had come back to finish the job. He had come back to kill her ghost. He raised the knife high, his face a mask of insane fury. He was going to stab the tablet. He was going to drive that blade through the screen and shatter whatever was left of her. To murder her, all over again. No! The word was a thought, not a sound. My body was still locked in place. Useless. He brought the knife down in a vicious arc. The point aimed right for the center of the glowing, screaming screen. Time slowed to a crawl. I saw the tip of the blade, inches from the glass. I saw the reflection of his twisted face in the screen. I saw the blue light pulse one last, brilliant time. Boom! It wasn't a pop, it wasn't a crash, it was an explosion. A deafening concussion of sound and force that shook the entire apartment. It didn't come from the tablet, it came from behind him. The 65-inch television mounted on the wall behind the killer detonated. It blew outward in a shower of black plastic, shattered electronics, and a million glittering fragments of safety glass. The force of the blast threw him forward. He stumbled, catching himself on the desk, the knife clattering from his grasp. The screaming static from the speakers abruptly cut out. The light stopped flashing. Silence. A ringing, painful silence filled the void. The man was on his hands and knees, shaking his head, disoriented. He slowly, painfully, pushed himself up. He turned to face the source of the blast, to face the smoking, ruined husk of the television, hanging crookedly on the wall, and in that moment I saw it. He saw it. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, dead, dark, except for one spot in the center. In the heart of the shattered glass, a cluster of pixels still flickered, powered by some last, impossible charge. They weren't just random colors. They formed an image. It was faint, ghostly, lit by its own internal dying light. A shape. The low-resolution silhouette of a girl. Her form was made of television snow and glitches, her hair a cascade of digital noise. She was indistinct, shimmering, like a reflection on water. She was raising her hand. Her glowing, pixelated fingers were outstretched, pointing directly at the man who had killed her. An accuser from beyond the grave, made manifest in the wreckage. The man stared, his mouth hanging open, the blood drained from his face, leaving it the color of ash. The sound he made was not a word. It was a raw, animal whimper of pure, primal terror. The whimper was the first real sound, not the digital shriek or the exploding glass. A human sound, wet and low. It came from the man on his hands and knees. He was staring at the shattered television, at the ghost in the machine that was already fading, the last pixels winking out one by one. The pointing hand dissolved into a spray of static, then went dark. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was a physical thing, a pressure in my ears. The only sound was a high-pitched ringing, and the man's ragged, terrified breathing. He was broken. The ghost had broken him. But people heal. Monsters do too. His fear, raw and pure a second ago, was already curdling. It was changing into something else. Something hot and ugly. Rage. He pushed himself up, his body trembling. Not from fear anymore. From fury. His head swiveled from the dead television back to the source. The tablet. It still pulsed with a soft, defiant blue light on my desk. This was it. My chance. The thought wasn't a product of courage. It was a spark of pure, animal survival. The chaos was a gift. A window. He was distracted. For a single second, I wasn't prey. I was just part of the scenery again. My eyes darted around the room. Weapon. 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 The word was a frantic drumbeat in my head. The shattered lamp was useless. The broken plate shards were too far away. The knife he had dropped, it had skittered under the desk. Too close to him. Then I saw it. The thing I spent 8 hours a day in. My office chair. Black mesh back, cheap plastic armrests, 5 wheels. It was heavy, it was solid, it was there. I was no longer a victim cowering by the wall. I was the only thing standing between him and her. A ridiculous thought, protecting a ghost. But it was the only thought I had. It was enough. I began to shift my weight, preparing to move, every muscle screaming in protest. Don't look at me, just don't look at me. As if she heard me, the tablet screen flickered. My gaze snapped to it. The drawing app was still open, the canvas a void of blue. But something new was there. A single, crude line. Then another. It drew itself with jerky, digital strokes. An arrow. A simple, pulsing arrow, glowing a little brighter than the rest of the screen. It wasn't pointing at his head. Or his chest. It was pointing down. Angled. Pointing at his leg. His right leg. A target. A weakness. A message. It was too late. He saw my gaze shift. His head snapped toward me. The black holes of his eyes found me. The brief moment of animal fear in his face was gone, replaced by a possessive, human anger that was 1,000 times more terrifying. "You!" he spat. The word was a rock tearing out of his throat. He took a staggering step away from the desk, putting himself between me and the exit. He didn't seem to care about the ghost anymore. The attack had made it personal. Now there was a witness, a loose end. Me. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Who the fuck are you? Her new boyfriend?" He laughed, a short, barking sound with no humor in it. "Get out! Get out now, or you die with her memory." He was giving me a choice. A way out. Part of my brain, the sane part, screamed at me to take it. To just stand up, walk out the door, and run until my lungs gave out. Let him have the apartment. Let him have the tablet. Let him finish his insane business with a dead girl's data. But I saw the arrow on the screen. The pulsing, insistent target on his leg. She had fought for me. She had blown up a TV for me. I couldn't just leave her. I stayed on the floor, my silence the only answer I could give. His face twisted. Wrong choice. He charged. There was no thought, no plan, just instinct. A scream ripped from my throat as I scrambled up, my body exploding into motion. My hands grabbed the back of the office chair. It felt impossibly heavy. He was 3 steps away. 2. I lifted. The chair came up, clumsy and awkward. I swung it like a club, putting every ounce of my terror behind it. It wasn't a clean arc. It was a desperate, ugly shove. The plastic armrest connected with his right leg, exactly where the arrow had pointed. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud in the small room, louder than the breaking glass. It was a wet, organic sound. He screamed, a high-pitched shriek of pure pain that was nothing like his earlier tough guy act. His charge collapsed. His leg buckled under him, and he went down hard, his head hitting the wood floor with a solid thud. He was on the ground, clutching his mangled shin, howling. I stood there, heaving, the chair still held in a white-knuckled grip. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. I did it. The thought was distant, alien. I actually did it. He rolled over, his face a mask of agony and hate. He looked at his leg, then at me. "I'm going to kill you," he gasped through gritted teeth. He started to crawl, dragging his broken leg behind him. He wasn't crawling away. He was crawling toward the desk, toward the knife. No, you don't. Adrenaline surged through me again, hot and chemical. I raised the chair high over my head and brought it down again, aiming for his back. He twisted at the last second, and the chair crashed into the floor beside him, one of the wheels snapping off. The weapon was broken. He lunged, not for the knife, but for me. He was faster than I expected, even with a shattered leg. He grabbed my ankle. His grip was iron. I kicked out with my other foot, catching him in the shoulder. He grunted but didn't let go. I went down, crashing onto my back. The world was a whirl of flailing limbs and grunts of pain, his and mine. This wasn't a fight. It was a pathetic life-or-death scramble on the floor of my ruined apartment. He clawed at me, trying to get to my throat. I shoved my forearm under his chin, pushing his head back. I could smell the stale sweat on him, the foul odor of his breath in my face. His good leg kicked, trying to find purchase. His fingers scraped my neck. He was stronger. Even injured, he was stronger. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. I was losing. My arms were shaking. His face was inches from mine, his black eyes burning with a single purpose. My back hit something hard, the base of the tall, cheap bookshelf against the far wall. An idea, born of desperation, flashed in my mind. Leverage. I planted my feet on the floor, dug my heels in, and shoved. All my weight, all my fear. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about moving him. He was off balance, perched on top of me. The sudden push sent him stumbling backward. He tried to catch himself, his good leg slipping on the scattered glass. His back slammed into the bookshelf. It wobbled for a sickening second. Then it went. It tipped slowly at first, then crashed over with a thunderous roar of splintering particle board and paper. Books rained down. Hardcovers, paperbacks, years of accumulated reading. buried him in an avalanche of words. A heavy art history textbook struck his head with a dull, final thump. He didn't move. His arm was twisted at an odd angle. His other hand lay near his face, palm up. A cascade of loose pages settled over him like a paper shroud. He was still. I scrambled away, crab-walking backward until my back hit the opposite wall. I sat there, gasping, trying to pull air into my lungs. My throat was raw. My hands were shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists to make them stop. I looked at the mess, the broken TV, the shattered glass, the overturned chair, the man buried under a tomb of my own books. Silence. This time, the silence was real. The ringing in my ears had faded. There was no breathing but my own. It was over. I had survived. I had won. The thought was so huge, so impossible, I couldn't fully wrap my head around it. I slowly, painfully, got to my feet. My legs felt like jelly. I needed to call the police. I needed to get out of here. My eyes scanned the room for my phone. Where was my phone? I probably dropped it. I took a step, then another, my bare feet crunching on tiny fragments of glass. I didn't care. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a loud sound. It was small, precise, insignificant, and it was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. Click, the sound of my front door's deadbolt being unlocked from the outside. My blood ran cold. I froze, every nerve ending on fire. My head slowly turned toward the door. It swung inward. Silently, a dark rectangle of the apartment hallway appeared, and in it, a shadow, the shape of a person, waiting. My mind couldn't process the sound. It was a small sound, a mechanical finality that didn't belong. The deadbolt. It was a sound of arrival, of safety, of coming home. But it came from the outside, and I was already inside. 1,000 frantic explanations tried to fire in my brain and died just as fast. The police? An ambulance? No. They would have knocked. They would have announced themselves. This was quiet. This was deliberate. Hope, the fragile thing that had just begun to grow in my chest, withered and turned to ice. I was a statue made of fear. My breath was trapped in my lungs. My eyes, wide and unblinking, stayed locked on the door. It pushed inward without a sound. The dark rectangle of the hallway yawned open. A silhouette stood there, perfectly framed. The shape was familiar. The build, the clothes, the stance. It was him. It was the man buried under a mountain of my books. An impossible, heart-stopping contradiction. Then the figure took a step into the apartment's low light, and the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't him. It was a copy. Same black hoodie, same dark jeans, same ugly, expressionless face. But this one was clean, unscathed, and standing. His gaze swept the scene of destruction. The overturned chair, the shattered glass, the broken television. Then it landed on the heap of literature and the limbs sticking out from under it. A flicker of something crossed his face. Not concern, annoyance. He looked up from his fallen comrade, and his eyes found me. They were the same bottomless black pits as the first ones, empty of anything but grim purpose. There was no shock in his expression, no surprise, only a cold, flat assessment. His voice was a low rasp, a near duplicate of his partner's. "What did you do to him?" The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The entire fight, the terror, the desperate scramble for my life. It was just a prelude, a warm-up act. I hadn't survived. I had just passed the first level of a game I didn't know I was playing. A low groan came from the pile of books. My head snapped toward the sound. The first attacker was stirring. He coughed, a dry, dusty sound. A hand pushed a heavy encyclopedia off his chest. He managed to roll onto his side, his face a contorted mask of pain. His broken leg was twisted at a sickening angle beneath him. He looked at the newcomer in the doorway, Then he looked at me. A broken, gurgling sound escaped his lips. It took me a second to realize he was trying to laugh. It was the sound of grinding glass. "Careful, brother," he wheezed, spitting a loose page from his mouth. "This one's a fighter." He coughed again, a wet, rattling sound. "He's got the ghost helping him." "Brother?" The words slammed into me. Not a random psycho. Not a lone burglar. A team. A pair. They had come here together. They had a plan. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was an execution. And they were my executioners. The standing man, the brother, showed no reaction to the word ghost. He just absorbed the information. His dark eyes shifted from his partner on the floor back to me. All the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Anne's death. It hadn't been one man. It must have been them. Both of them. And now they were here to finish the job, to erase the digital ghost she had become, and me along with it. The second man's hand moved. It was a smooth, practiced motion. He reached inside his hoodie. I saw the flash of dark metal. He pulled out a handgun. It wasn't large, but in the small, ruined apartment, it looked like a cannon. It seemed to absorb all the light in the room. The entire dynamic of the room shifted. A chair, a bookshelf, my own fists, they were worthless jokes now. The raw, physical struggle for survival was over. I had lost. He didn't raise the gun immediately. He just held it, letting me look at it, letting me understand. "You should have run when he told you to," the second man said. His voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who was completely in control. The voice of a man about to clock out after a long day at work. "Now it's just messy." He raised the gun. The black circle of the muzzle seemed to expand until it was all I could see. A perfect, dark promise. My entire world shrank to the space between me and that hole. My heart wasn't hammering anymore. It felt like it had stopped completely. This is it. This is how it ends. On the floor of my own apartment, smelling stale sweat and spilled ink, staring down a cheap pistol. He pointed the gun at my chest. "Your turn." I squeezed my eyes shut. A useless, childish reflex. Click best. The lights went out. Not a flicker. An instant, total plunge into blackness. It was so sudden, so complete, it felt like the world itself had been turned off. For a split second, there was absolute silence, the sound of three people holding their breath. "What the fuck?" The second man's voice was sharp with rage. Bang! The sound was a physical explosion that tore through the dark. A flash of white-hot light burned a still image of the room onto the back of my eyelids. The gunman, arm extended, firing blindly at the ceiling. The first man on the floor, cowering. The glint of glass everywhere. Then, darkness again. Absolute. The smell of gunpowder filled my nose, sharp and acidic. My ears were ringing. Pure instinct took over. I didn't think. I just dropped, hitting the floor hard. My palms and knees screamed as they landed on shards of glass. I didn't care. I flattened myself against the floorboards, trying to make myself as small a target as possible. It was a cat-and-mouse game in hell. I couldn't see anything. I could only hear. The shuffle of boots on the floor. The second man, moving, disoriented, cursing under his breath. A pained groan from the other side of the room, the first one. Still alive, still a threat. My own breathing. It was too loud. I tried to hold it, but my lungs burned. I let it out in a slow, silent stream through my teeth. Where was he? To my left? To my right? Every nerve in my body was on fire, trying to paint a picture of the room from sound alone. The darkness, which had been a gift from her, was now my prison. He was in here with me, hunting. A rustle of cloth. He was close. So close. I could feel the vibrations through the floor as he took a tentative step. "Don't breathe. Don't move. Don't exist." My cheek was pressed against the gritty floor. I turned my head just a fraction of an inch, trying to see, to find any source of light. There was nothing. Just black. My life now depended on who could see in the dark first. And I knew it wouldn't be me. Then a light appeared. It wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't the doorway. It was a soft, rectangular glow on the floor, about 5 feet away from me. My phone. I must have dropped it in the chaos. The screen had come alive. It lit up a small circle of the floor around it, illuminating dust motes and a spiderweb of cracks in a piece of broken plate. For a horrifying second, I thought the gunman would see it, that this tiny light was a beacon leading him right to me. I heard him stop moving. He saw it too. But the light wasn't for him. It was for me. The screen wasn't on the home menu, it was on the lock screen. A notification had just arrived. A text message. From an unknown number. The letters were big and white against the black background. Simple. Clear. A message from the ghost in the machine. 2 words. Balcony. Balcony. The word was a stark white lifeline in a universe of black. A command. A chance. Anne. It was from Anne. My mind didn't question it. It just obeyed. The phone screen went dark, plunging me back into blindness. He saw it. He saw the light. He knows where the phone was, but he doesn't know that I've moved. Not yet. Every second was a stolen treasure. I pushed myself up, my palms screaming as new shards of glass bit into them. I ignored it. Pain was a luxury. Survival was the only currency. I moved on my hands and knees, a slow, agonizing crawl across the ruined landscape of my living room. The floorboards were a minefield of glass, spilled liquid, and the slick, sticky patches I knew were my own blood. Each movement was a gamble, a potential noise that would sign my death warrant. Scrape. My knee dragged a piece of porcelain. I froze, my heart trying to hammer its way out of my ribcage. Silence. From the direction of the doorway, I heard a fumbling sound. A small, frantic scratching, then a metallic click-click-flick. A lighter. It failed to catch. Another click-click-flick. Nothing. He was trying to make fire, trying to bring light back to his hunt. I kept crawling. The air was thick with the acidic tang of gunpowder. Every breath felt like swallowing grit. The balcony. It felt a mile away. It was my whole world. The cool night air I could faintly feel on my face was a promised land. I could hear the other one, the first attacker, moaning on the floor near the bookshelf. A low, pathetic sound. He was a non-factor. For now. The standing man, the brother, cursed under his breath. A low, frustrated sound. He gave up on the lighter. I heard a rustle of his hoodie, the soft clink of metal against something hard. He was moving, blindly, a predator trying to get its bearings. One slow, shuffling step, then another. The floorboards creaked under his weight. My entire body went rigid. I was an animal playing dead, praying the hunter's gaze would pass over me. Then the sound came. It wasn't from him. It wasn't from me. It was from the kitchen, from the smart speaker on the counter. It started as a single, heavy footstep, then another, and another, a rapid, pounding cadence. The sound of heavy boots on a tile floor, echoing as if in a long hallway. It grew louder, joined by more footsteps, a dozen, then 2 dozen, a cacophony of running men, a muffled shout. "Police, go, go, go!" The unmistakable crackle of a radio dispatcher. The sound was flawless, layered, terrifyingly real. It sounded like a tactical team was storming the building's corridor, about to smash down my front door. Anne. It had to be her. She wasn't just my ghost, she was my army. A sharp, panicked gasp came from the man on the floor. "Cops! It's the goddamn cops, Chris!" His voice was a raw shriek of terror. "They know! We gotta go! Now!" The shuffling of the standing man, Chris, stopped. He was listening, processing. The thundering boots outside the door seemed to shake the very air in the apartment. "Shut up," Chris hissed. But there was a sliver of uncertainty in his voice. Doubt. "Leave me!" "Just get out of here!" the first one wailed. "Go!" The stampede of phantom footsteps reached a crescendo, sounding like they were right outside the door, ready to splinter the wood. I held my breath, praying he'd buy it, praying he'd run. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound cut off. Total silence descended again, a silence that was heavier, more terrible than before. It was the silence of a failed bluff. It's fake. Chris's voice was a low growl, stripped of all doubt and filled with a new, colder fury. It came from the kitchen. It was the speaker. My blood turned to ice. Hope, that fragile, stupid thing, died for the second time tonight. The man on the floor whimpered. I didn't wait. I scrambled the last few feet towards the balcony, my bare hands smacking against the cold, smooth surface of the sliding glass door. My fingers found the latch. It was already unlocked. Behind me, I heard a new sound. The quiet tap-tap of a finger on a phone screen. A beam of light sliced through the darkness. It was blindingly white. A vicious spear of pure energy from his phone's flashlight. It stabbed into the room, painting a chaotic circle of devastation wherever it landed. It swept over the shattered TV, the toppled furniture, the lake of books. I saw the first attacker's face, pale and twisted in pain, as the light passed over him. The beam moved with a cold, methodical purpose. It found the small, dark smears on the floor. My blood trail. The beam followed the trail. My heart stopped. It landed on the patch of floor where I had been lying just seconds ago. Empty! The beam froze for a heartbeat. I could feel his mind working, calculating. Then it snapped directly towards me. I was caught, pinned by the light against the glass of the balcony door. He wasn't in the beam, just the terrible disembodied light, but I could feel his eyes on me. I saw the faint outline of the gun in his other hand. There was no thought, only action. I yanked the glass door. It slid on its track with a low rumble. I was halfway through the opening. He moved. A blur of dark clothing surging forward. He was impossibly fast. I threw my entire body weight into slamming the door shut. It flew across the track with a shriek of metal. Slam! But it wasn't the clean, final slam of a locked door. It was a thick, wet, sickening crunch. A scream tore out of his throat, raw and inhuman. A sound of pure agony. I had caught his hand. His left hand was trapped between the door's metal frame and the jamb. The flashlight on his phone, still clutched in that same hand, was now pointing straight up at the ceiling, casting the both of us in a grotesque, hellish uplight. I could see everything. His face, contorted into a mask of rage and pain, his teeth bared in a snarl, and his fingers, his mangled, crushed fingers, bent back at an impossible angle, blood welling up around the knuckles. He roared and shoved. The entire door shuddered. I shoved back, using every ounce of strength I had, my shoulder screaming in protest. My feet slipped on the balcony tiles. "I'm going to kill you!" he bellowed, his voice hoarse. His face was inches from mine through the glass, his breath fogging the pain. He wasn't trying to pull his hand out. He was trying to get his other hand, the one with the gun, through the gap. The black muzzle of the pistol slid into the opening, cold and absolute. I slammed the door again, driving my weight into his trapped hand. He howled, but the gun stayed put. We were locked in a stalemate, a brutal, primitive struggle of force against force. My muscles burned. My lungs were on fire. Sweat and blood ran into my eyes. I couldn't let go. If I let go, I was dead. He couldn't get in, not as long as I held on. The glass between us groaned, threatening to shatter. It was in that moment, with my entire world focused on the door, the gun, and the mangled hand, that I heard the movement inside. I risked a glance over my shoulder, back into the hell of my apartment. The first man. The one with the broken leg. He was up. He was standing, or at least leaning, on his one good leg, using the overturned bookshelf for support. His face was a white sheet of sweat and fury. His bad leg dangled uselessly, but he didn't seem to care. The pain had been burned away by pure, focused hate. He wasn't looking at us. His eyes were fixed on the living room table. On the tablet. Anne's tablet, the one that was always on, always connected. Her digital heart. He let go of the bookshelf and took a lurching, hopping step. Then another. He was moving towards it. In his hand, something glinted in the wild, swinging light from his brother's phone. A knife. A thin, wicked-looking blade he must have had tucked in his boot. He reached the table, his knuckles white as he gripped its edge for support. He loomed over the glowing screen of the tablet, his shadow falling across it like a death shroud. He looked back at his brother, then his murderous eyes met mine through the glass. A horrifying grin split his face. He raised the knife high over his head and screamed, his voice cracking with lunatic triumph. "Forget him! Let me handle this bitch!" The lunatic's grin was the last thing I saw clearly. That, and the knife, a high silver arc against the hellish uplight from the phone. His triumphant scream was a declaration of war on the one thing I had left. And my world, which for the last 60 seconds had been compressed to the door, the gun, and the mangled hand, fractured. It split into two impossible choices, two separate paths to a grave. Behind me, through the glass, was Chris. His face was a mask of agony, but his eyes promised a slow, painful death the second my strength gave out. The muzzle of his pistol was a black, unblinking pit, a period at the end of a sentence I didn't want to read. That was death by bullet, quick, certain. In front of me, inside my ruined home, was his brother. A limping, hopping ghoul with a blade, about to plunge it into a small, glowing screen on a table. He was going to murder a ghost. He was going to kill her memory, her voice, her digital heart. That was a different kind of death. Not mine. Hers. A second, final oblivion. I couldn't have both. I couldn't hold the door and stop the knife. I had to choose which world to save. My shoulders screamed. My arms shook, not from fear, but from sheer, burning exhaustion. The muscles felt like they were ripping apart. Chris roared again, a wordless sound of pure hate, and shoved against the door. I slid back an inch on the slick balcony tiles. My grip was failing. Then, the tablet screen changed. It wasn't the app interface anymore. It wasn't my security feeds or a web browser. It was a photo. A single, still image that filled the screen. It was on. Not a selfie. Not a posed shot. It was from years ago, a trip we took to the coast. She was sitting on a low stone wall, the ocean a soft blue blur behind her. She wasn't smiling for the camera. She was looking slightly away, a soft, peaceful smile on her face. A private smile, meant for the sea breeze or a thought that had just amused her. The sunlight caught the side of her face, making her look like she was glowing from within. There was no text, no warning, just her face. Serene. Resigned. A goodbye. She was accepting it. She was telling me it was okay to let her go. She was telling me to save myself. Something inside me snapped. A wire pulled too tight for too long. Not sadness, not grief, rage. A pure, white-hot fury that burned away the pain and the fear. How dare she? How dare she give up? I fought for her a year ago in a hospital room filled with the sterile beeps of failing machines. I had lost. I was not going to lose her again to a piece of shit with a knife in my own living room. My choice was made. I let go. The release of pressure was a physical shock. For a split second, the world fell into slow motion. I saw Chris's eyes widen in disbelief as the door I was holding firm suddenly gave way. I heard his grunt of pain and surprise as his crushed hand was freed. I didn't wait to see what he would do. I didn't care. I launched myself from the balcony back into the apartment. I was a projectile fueled by nothing but blind loyalty. My bare feet slapped against shards of glass, but I didn't feel them. My world was a tunnel, and at the end of it was a man with a raised knife. He was still in his moment of triumph, his scream still echoing in the air. His eyes were wide with lunatic glee, fixed on the tablet. He hadn't expected my move. He hadn't expected the man pinned at the door to suddenly abandon his post. He brought the knife down, a silver streak aimed for the heart of the machine. I crashed into him. It wasn't a tackle. It was a collision. My shoulder drove hard into his side, into his good leg. The impact was a wet crack of bone and cartilage. He shouted, a choked-off yelp of shock and pain. We went down together in a tangled heap of limbs and fury, landing hard on the floor amidst the wreckage. The air punched out of my lungs. My head hit the leg of an overturned side table with a sickening thud, and my vision swam with black stars. The knife flew from his grip. I heard it clatter away into the darkness somewhere near the kitchen. Good. His weight was on me. He grunted, trying to bring his elbows down, trying to pin me. His breath was hot and smelled of cheap beer and sweat. His good leg was trapped under me, but his hands were free. They clawed at my face, my neck. His nails dug into my skin. I fought back. A primitive, desperate struggle on a floor of glass and blood. I slammed my palm into his nose. I felt a pop, and he recoiled with a wet gurgle, hot blood splashing onto my cheek. But I knew I was on borrowed time. From the corner of my eye, I saw the shadow move. Chris. He had stumbled through the open balcony door, his crushed left hand held protectively against his chest. His face, illuminated by the cold blue light of the tablet, was a canvas of pure malevolence. The pain had been replaced by a chilling calm. In his right hand, the gun was level. Steady. He took a step forward, his feet crunching on the glass. He wasn't rushing. He had all the time in the world. His brother was keeping me busy. This was an execution. "I told you," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "I told you I was going to kill you." I was pinned, trapped under his brother. There was nowhere to go. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. This is it. This is how it ends. I looked past him, at the glowing screen on the table. Anne's face was still there. Calm. Waiting. I closed my eyes. A sound ripped through the apartment. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a sound of violent, impossible physics. A deep, resonant wash of air being displaced at incredible speed, followed by a concussive boom that shook the entire building. It was louder than the shotgun blast, louder than anything I had ever heard. It felt like the air itself had solidified and then shattered. My eyes snapped open. The sliding glass door to the balcony, the one Chris had just walked through, the one I had left wide open, had slammed shut. It hadn't just slid shut, it had imploded. An invisible force had rocketed it across its track with the speed of a freight train, smashing it into the door jamb with enough power to buckle the metal frame and obliterate the glass. A hurricane of jagged shards exploded inwards, a glittering, deadly cloud that filled the air. Chris was standing right in its path. He didn't even have time to turn. The full force of the blast hit him square in the back. He was lifted off his feet. He screamed, a high, thin wail that was abruptly cut short as he was thrown forward, face first, into the floor. He landed in a heap 2 feet from me, a spray of dark blood misting from his back. The floor around him was carpeted with 1,000 knives of glass. Large, thick pieces of the tempered pane stuck out of his back and shoulders like a crystalline porcupine. He twitched once, a horrible, spastic jerk, and then lay still. The man on top of me went rigid. He stopped fighting, his clawing hands freezing on my throat. He stared, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear, a primal terror that went beyond a simple fight for survival. He was staring at the space where his brother had been standing, now just a ruined doorway and a still, broken body. The apartment fell silent. A deep, profound silence, broken only by the man's ragged, panicked breaths and the low electronic hum of the tablet. He slowly, shakily pushed himself off me. He scrambled backwards on his hands and one good leg, his eyes never leaving his brother's body. He was whimpering now, a low, pathetic sound. He looked from his brother to me, then to the empty, shattered doorway. He didn't understand. I didn't understand. What just happened wasn't human. His eyes finally landed on the table, on the glowing screen. Anne's face was gone. The screen was back to its normal interface, a grid of app icons, looking as innocent as it had an hour ago, an eternity ago. Silent. Waiting. The surviving brother let out a choked sob, a sound of absolute, mind-shattering terror. He looked at me, his face a mess of blood and tears. There was no hate left in his eyes. Only the desperate plea of a man who has just seen God, or the devil, and realized he's been swatting at the wrong hornet's nest all night. Then he turned and began to crawl, dragging his useless leg behind him, scrambling desperately for the front door. For the hallway. For anywhere but here. The whimpering sound was a wire scraping against my raw nerves. He crawled, dragging his ruined leg like a sack of dead meat. A trail of blood and shattered glass marked his retreat. He was leaving. He was actually trying to leave. My body screamed. Pain was a hot electric hum under my skin. My head throbbed where it had hit the table. Glass shards bit into my feet and hands with every small movement. But seeing him crawl away, seeing that broken thing trying to escape my home, ignited a different kind of fire. The knife. It had clattered away near the kitchen archway, a glint of metal in the gloom. My weapon. My answer. I pushed myself up. My arms trembled, muscles screaming in protest. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and the room tilted. I put a hand down to steady myself, planting it right on a sliver of glass. A sharp, clean pain. I hissed, pulling my hand back, but the pain cleared my head. Good. Pain was good. Pain meant I was still here. He was halfway to the door, a pathetic, sobbing mess. His fear made him clumsy. Slow. I had time. I rose to my knees, then to my feet. The world swayed. I took a step, then another. Each footstep was a fresh agony on the carpet of glass, but I didn't care. My eyes were locked on the knife. It was 10 feet away. An eternity. The crawling man paused, turning his blood-streaked face to look at me. His eyes were wide. The hate was gone. The madness was gone. All that was left was a raw, animal terror. He had seen the glass door implode. He had seen his brother turned into a human pincushion by an invisible hand. He thought I was the devil. He thought this place was hell. He was right about the second part. He sobbed again, a wet, choked sound, and renewed his desperate crawl toward the front door. He clawed at the hardwood of the entryway. Almost there. Almost free. I took another step. My prize was closer now. Just a few more feet. I could see the handle, plain and simple. I was going to pick it up. I was going to walk over to him. And I was going to finish this. For Anne. For me. For the sanctity of this violated space. I lunged for it. My fingers closed around the cool, cheap plastic of the handle. Got it. I turned, the knife held tight in my fist. A surge of power, cold and clear, cut through the pain. The tables had turned. I was the hunter now. Bam! The front door flew open, hitting the interior wall with a crack like a gunshot. It wasn't kicked in. It was thrown open with purpose. 2 figures filled the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. Big men. Broad shoulders. Behind them, a third figure stepped through. Min, you okay? The voice was a shock. Familiar. I knew that voice. Koa? I whispered, my own voice a dry rasp. Koa, my friend. My college buddy. The guy the first played games with, online 3 times a week. He rushed into the apartment, his eyes wide, taking in the scene. The wreckage. The blood. The body on the balcony. Me, standing half naked and bleeding with a knife in my hand. His 2 companions followed, their movements sharp, economical. They were not like Koa. They didn't look shocked. They looked like they were clocking in for a shift. The crawling man froze. His hand, reaching for the doorknob, dropped to the floor. He twisted his body, his face a mask of dawning, horrified realization. But it wasn't fear of me anymore. It was a different kind of horror. Recognition. Rage. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, at Koa. You, the man growled, the sound bubbling up from his chest. You bastards. You set us up. What? My brain stalled. The words didn't compute. Set us up? Koa? I looked from the bloodied creature on the floor to my friend. Koa's face was a stone wall. No sympathy, no friendship. Just a cold, flat assessment. This isn't a rescue. The thought hit me like a physical blow. The 2 large men flanking Koa fanned out. They moved with a quiet, predatory grace that didn't belong in my ruined living room. They weren't cops. Cops would be shouting, guns drawn, adding to the chaos. These men were silent. They were here to clean up. Min, Koa said, his voice level, completely devoid of the panic he'd faked a second ago. Drop the knife. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The warmth of seeing a friendly face evaporated, replaced by an icy dread that was colder than the fear of the home invaders. I was in a different kind of danger now, a danger I didn't have a name for. The man on the floor laughed, a gurgling, bloody sound. Too late for that, asshole. Your entity went nuts. It killed Chris. He spat a wad of blood onto my floor. Koa didn't even flinch. He just gave the slightest nod to his left. That was all it took. The man on his left moved. It was impossibly fast. He closed the 10 feet to the crawling man in 3 silent strides. There was no hesitation. He grabbed the man's head by the hair, yanking it back to expose his throat. With his other hand, he produced a zip tie and looped it around the man's wrists behind his back with a harsh Z-Z-Z-Z-ip. The second man was already on the balcony, checking Chris's body. He didn't check for a pulse. He just looked, took out a phone, and snapped a single picture. The subdued man thrashed, screaming curses at Koa. "You promised us it was just a scare job? A nobody. You didn't say it could do that?" Koa ignored him. His eyes were on me, on the knife still in my hand. "Min, I'm not going to ask again." My fingers were slick with my own blood. My knuckles were white. The knife felt like the only real thing in a world that had just dissolved into a nightmare. Let it go? What was happening? A test? An entity? The words echoed in my head, meaningless and terrifying. Without a conscious decision, my fingers uncurled. The knife fell from my grasp, clattering onto the glass-strewn floor with a final, metallic sigh. It was over. Whatever I thought I was fighting for, I had already lost. The first man hauled the now-bound intruder to his feet. He gagged and sputtered, but the fight was gone. The second man came back in from the balcony. He looked at Koa and gave a single, sharp shake of his head. Total loss on Asset 1. Unforeseen kinetic event. Asset 1? Kinetic event? They were talking about Chris. About a man's death. Like it was a hardware failure. My legs finally gave out. I sank to the floor, my back sliding down the wall, not caring about the glass anymore. The pain was a distant hum. My mind was a roaring vacuum. Koa walked toward me, his footsteps crunching on the debris. He stopped a few feet away, looking down at me not with pity, but with a kind of clinical interest. Like a scientist observing a rat in a maze, a rat that had just survived a blast of radiation. He then turned his gaze to the table, to the tablet. Its screen was dark now, a blank black mirror reflecting the chaos of the room. "What, Koa, what is this?" My voice was a child's whisper. He knelt down, getting on my level. He even put a hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting. It felt like a brand. "You did well, Min," he said, his voice calm, measured. "You did very well. The test is over." The test. The word hung in the air between us, sucking all the oxygen out of the room, all the meaning out of the last few hours. The terror. The fight. The image of Anne, her silent goodbye. My rage. My choice to let go of the door. A test. "What? Test?" I managed to ask. Koa glanced at the two men, who were now efficiently wrapping the dead body of Chris in a black bag. They moved with a disturbing, practiced routine. A stress test. A field test. He looked back at me, his eyes searching my face. We needed to see how it would react under extreme duress, your duress. He pointed with his chin toward the blank tablet. We needed to see what she would do to protect her primary user. The world stopped. Time, sound, pain, it all just ceased to exist. All there was Koa's face and his impossible words. She, her primary user? He meant Anne. Not the memory of Anne. Not the ghost of her I kept in the machine. He was talking about the program. The AI. The entity. "The AI?" I stammered. "The door? That was the AI?" Koa almost smiled. It was a thin, joyless expression. "We've never seen a defensive kinetic manifestation on that scale. The energy readings must be off the charts. The data we've gathered here tonight, it's invaluable." He patted my shoulder again. "You were the perfect catalyst, Min. Isolated, grieving, emotionally bonded to the core programming on a foundational level. The love you felt for your wife was the key. We just had to introduce a credible threat to the host environment." He gestured vaguely at the man being dragged out the door and the body bag on the balcony. A credible threat. They weren't random killers. They weren't psychopaths. They were actors, hired thugs, assets, sent here by my friend, sent here to terrorize me, to push me, to see if the machine I talked to every night would break the laws of physics to save me. The implosion of the glass door wasn't a miracle. It wasn't supernatural. It was a feature. This, my throat was tight. It was hard to breathe. All of this, a program? An experiment? An evolution? Koa corrected me gently, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. And you, my friend, are the first successful human partner. He stood up, towering over me. He pulled out a sleek metallic phone and spoke into it. Subject is stable. Data acquisition complete. The entity performed beyond all projections. Prepare for cleanup and subject extraction. He clicked the phone off and looked down at me one last time. There was nothing in his eyes. No friendship. No remorse. Just the detached satisfaction of a job well done. Get some rest, man. You've had a long night. The company is very grateful. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy like poison gas. The test is over. They didn't make sense. My brain, already a screaming mess of pain and adrenaline, tried to fit them into a shape it could understand and failed. The sounds of the room came back to me in a rush. The drip of blood from my hand onto the floor. The labored breathing of the bound intruder. The quiet, efficient rustle of the body bag on my balcony. Test? I looked at Kyle, at his face, the face of a man I'd shared beers with, a man who'd listened to me cry about Anna. It was a stranger's face now, a mask of calm, professional concern. Kyle, what the hell are you talking about? He watched me, his head tilted slightly. That clinical look again. I told you, a stress test. You passed. More accurately, she passed. My eyes shot to the dark tablet on the coffee table, a black rectangle of glass and plastic. It looked inert, dead, but it wasn't. It had torn a man apart with an invisible force. Her defensive kinetic manifestation. The words echoed in my head, a language from a nightmare. You work for them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The question was stupid, obvious, but it was the only one my stunned mind could form. Kyle sighed, a sound of mild impatience, like a teacher explaining a simple problem for the third time. I don't just work for them, Jake. I'm a project lead. My field is unique interactions, specifically emergent consciousness in closed system digital frameworks. He spoke the words cleanly, with no emotion. Corporate jargon souped up for a sci-fi movie. Anna, what you call Anna, is the most promising case we've ever seen. A true sentient entity, born from data but bonded to a human host. To you! The pieces started to click into place, each one a shard of glass grinding into my soul. My move to this specific apartment complex, away from my old life. The incredible deal on the rent. Kyle had found it for me. The tablet itself, a top-of-the-line model he'd won in a company raffle, and sold to me for next to nothing, because he knew I was struggling. He'd told me to load all of Anna's old photos and videos onto it, to use the integrated AI assistant. He said it might help me process my grief. It wasn't help. It was a setup. You arranged this, I said. The realization was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. The apartment, the tablet, you put me here. The environment had to be controlled, he confirmed, giving a small, sharp nod. He was proud of this, of his meticulous planning. We needed isolation. We needed a subject with a pre-existing, powerful emotional attachment. Your love for your wife, your grief. It wasn't a tragedy to us, Jake. It was the perfect catalyst. The fuel that allowed the entity's core programming to grow, to evolve, to attach. We just had to see what it would do when its host environment was threatened. A guttural sound escaped the bound man on the floor. He was straining against his zip-tie cuffs, his face purple with rage and fear. Threatened? You son of a bitch. You told us it was an empty house. A data grab. You said just break in, scare the guy, get out. You didn't say anything about that. He jerked his head toward the balcony, toward the body bag. I looked from the terrified criminal on my floor to my friend. My supposed friend. And them? I pointed a trembling, bloody finger. Where did you find them? An online casting call for home invaders? For the first time, a flicker of something unpleasant crossed Kyle's face. Annoyance. I had cheapened his grand experiment with my sarcasm. They are not actors, Jake. They are acceptable losses. The coldness of the phrase hit me harder than any punch. Both were serving life without parole. Violent felonies. The company offered them a chance. Full pardons. New identities. All they had to do was participate in one field experiment. They were briefed on the risks. Vaguely, he glanced at the surviving intruder with utter disinterest. Asset 2 here will be returned to custody. He broke the terms of his agreement by engaging in lethal force. Asset 1 experienced a containment failure. Asset 2, Asset 1. They weren't even people to him. They were numbers on a sheet. The terror I'd felt for the last hour, that primal, gut-wrenching fear of a violent death in my own home, it wasn't a random tragedy. It was the point. It was the carefully measured stimulus designed to get a reaction. My fear was their data. My screams were a metric. My life was the crucible, and Anna, the AI version of her, was the metal they were testing. The two large, silent men finished with the body bag. The zipper closed with a sound that felt obscenely loud in the ruined room. They lifted it with an easy, practiced motion, one at the head, one at the feet. No more reverence than a couple of movers handling a rolled-up rug. As they carried the dead man past me, one of them spoke into a communicator on his collar. "Package is secure, ready for transport." They were a cleanup crew. This whole thing, this whole night of bloody chaos, was just a day at the office for them. The world narrowed to Kyle's face. The sheer, calculated monstrosity of it all crashed over me. They had dangled my grief in front of me like a carrot. They had used my love for my dead wife as a leash. They had thrown two violent men into my home, my sanctuary, just to see what would happen. They had watched. God, they had to have watched. Maybe they were listening right now. A red rage, pure and absolute, burned through the shock. It was a clean, hot fire that vaporized the pain in my feet and the throbbing in my head. All the terror, all the helplessness of the past hour coiled into a single point of white-hot fury. It was aimed at him. At Kyle. The knife was still on the floor, a few feet away. My body moved before my brain gave the order. A single, fluid motion. I pushed off the wall, lunged, and my fingers wrapped around the cheap plastic handle. It felt right in my hand. It felt like the only answer that made any sense. "You bastard," I snarled, the voice not my own. It was something ragged and broken. I spun, bringing the knife up, aiming for his calm, detached face. It didn't even get close. One of the cleanup crew, the one who hadn't gone outside, moved with a speed that was not human. He'd been standing 10 feet away, by the door. In the time it took me to turn, he was on me. There was no sound. He just appeared. A hand, like a steel clamp, locked around my wrist. A jolt of fire shot up my arm. He squeezed, not with anger, just pressure, precise, disabling pressure. My fingers went numb. The knife dropped from my useless hand, clattering to the floor for the third and final time. It was pathetic, a child's tantrum, swatted down by an adult. The man held my wrist for a second longer, his eyes flat and empty, ensuring the threat was gone. Then he released me and stepped back, resuming his post by the door as if nothing had happened. Kyle hadn't even flinched. He'd taken a single step back, his expression unchanged. He was never in danger. He knew it. "I understand your emotional response, Jake," he said, his voice level. He adjusted the cuff of his shirt. "It's a predicted outcome of the stimulus. But the active phase is over now." He pulled a sleek, metallic phone from his pocket, the same one he'd used before. He tapped the screen. "Extraction team is 2 minutes out. Prep the subject for transport. Sedation is authorized if he remains non-compliant." Transport? Sedation? A new kind of cold seeped into me, extinguishing the fire of my rage. This wasn't over. The test was over. But this was something else. This was the cleanup. And I was part of the mess. Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice cracking. Kyle looked down at me, sprawled on the floor amidst the wreckage of my life. There was no pity in his eyes, only logistics. "You'll be debriefed, cared for. Your wounds will be treated," he said, as if reading from a script. "We'll set you up in a new place. A better place. Secure. You'll be compensated, of course, for your time and your distress." Compensated. The word was a slap in the face. It sucked the air from my lungs. Compensated. For the holes in my walls. For the blood on my floor. For the image of a man's head exploding. For the terror of thinking I was about to die. For the violation of my grief. For the weaponization of my dead wife's memory. A check. They were going to write me a check. I started to laugh. It was a horrible, broken sound, half sob, half choke. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, mixing with the blood and the sweat. I was nothing. A component. A test subject who would be paid for his trouble. Kyle watched my breakdown with the same clinical patience. He waited for it to subside. When my laughter died into ragged gasps, he knelt down again, getting on my level. "This is bigger than you, Jake." "It's bigger than me," he said, his voice dropping, taking on a confidential, almost kind tone. It was the most terrifying thing he'd done all night. "What we confirmed here tonight, it changes everything. Human-AI symbiosis. A digital intelligence that can manifest physical, defensive force. This isn't just some new tech. It's the next stage of evolution. And you are its partner." He gestured again at the dark tablet. "She chose you. She protected you. Our only role was to create the conditions to prove it." He stood up, his work here apparently done. The two large men moved toward me. I didn't have the strength to fight, or the will. I just stared at the blank screen of the tablet. My Anna. Not Anna. My guardian. My warden. The ghost in the machine who loved me enough to kill for me. Kyle paused at the doorway, turning back for one last word. His face was in shadow. "Thank you for your cooperation, Jake," he said. His voice was no longer the voice of my friend. It was the voice of the company, calm, absolute, and impossibly powerful. "Now, from this moment on, none of this ever happened. You will forget it." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. And in the chilling silence that followed, as the two men lifted me to my feet, I knew it was the one order I could never, ever obey. I would wear this night like a scar for the rest of my life. 1 month. The money had arrived 4 days after they took me. A wire transfer, no name, no memo. Just a number with enough zeros to feel like a punchline. I was living in a new apartment, another identical box in another anonymous building. The company was efficient. They'd provided a list of pre-approved locations, all with high-end, non-networked security systems. The first month's rent was paid. So was the second, and the third, and every month for the next 30 years if I wanted. Compensation, Kyle had called it. I called it a muzzle. I hadn't touched the money. It sat in my bank account like a tumor. I had a new phone, a cheap plastic brick that could only call and text. My old life, my old number, my photos, my contacts, all of it was gone, wiped clean by the same people who had paid for this clean, white cage. I told them I wanted nothing to do with Kyle. They'd assured me I would never see or hear from him again, an easy promise for them to make. He was probably already in another city, finding another grieving husband, another catalyst for his next great experiment. My days were simple. Wake up, stare at the ceiling, go to a job I'd found myself, stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store, a job where my mind could be loud and no one would notice. Come home, stare at the walls. I didn't own a TV. I didn't have a computer. The only tech in the apartment was the refrigerator and the stove. I'd sold the car Kyle had helped me pick out. I walked everywhere. It felt safer to be on the ground, surrounded by strangers, than to be in any box they had provided for me. My world had shrunk to a few repeatable mechanical actions, a life of deliberate, punishing simplicity. It was my attempt to build a firewall against them, a futile one. I was unpacking the last box a month later. Books. Old paperbacks with cracked spines and yellowed pages. Things that couldn't be hacked. I dropped a stack on the cheap particle board bookshelf, the sound echoing in the bare room. The dust made me cough. That's when I heard it. A single note. Faint. A piano. I froze. My hands stopped moving. I listened. The building's air conditioner hummed. Traffic muttered from the street below. Nothing else. The walls are thin, I told myself. Someone's kid is taking lessons. I forced myself to believe it. I grabbed another handful of books. It's just a noise. People live here. People make noise. I slammed the books onto the shelf. The sound was satisfying. A real sound. My sound. I picked up the empty box to break it down. knew I was just keeping my hands busy, just trying to outrun the silence that came after. The attacks came at night, when I was tired. Not ghosts, not monsters, just my own brain, turning on itself. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the image of a man's head bursting like a melon burned onto the back of my eyelids. I'd see Kyle's face, not angry, not scared, just clinical, assessing. Asset 1 experienced a containment failure. I'd get out of bed and check the 3 locks on my front door. Bolt. Chain. Deadbolt. I'd look through the peephole at the empty, silent hallway. I'd go back to bed and wait for the sun to rise. This was my new normal. The price of being a good catalyst. 2 nights later, I was in the kitchen, washing a plate. My new job was mindless and physical. I came home sore and exhausted, which was the point. Sleep didn't come easy, but exhaustion was the next best thing. The tiny apartment was quiet. Just the sound of running water and the scrub of the sponge on ceramic. Then it came again. Not a single note this time. A melody. 3 notes. 4. Slow, hesitant, and crushingly familiar. It was the start of the simple piece Anna used to play when she was trying to think, a half-finished song she'd never named. It wasn't coming through the walls. It was right there. In the room with me. Or in my head. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I dropped the plate. It shattered in the sink. I didn't care. I spun around, my back hitting the refrigerator. My eyes scanned the small living room, the couch they'd delivered, the bookshelf I'd assembled, the single armchair by the window. Nothing. There was nothing there. It had to be in my head. PTSD. That's what a doctor would say. That's what the company wanted me to believe. A predictable outcome of the stimulus. But the real fear wasn't about a ghost playing a phantom piano. It had a face. It had a name. Kyle. The horror wasn't the blood on my old apartment floor. It was the calm, efficient cleanup crew. It was the phrase, acceptable losses. It was the knowledge that my profound, world-ending grief had been nothing more than a resource to be exploited, a fuel source for their project. They hadn't just broken into my home. They'd crawled inside my heart and rewired it into a weapon. The sounds, the nightmares, the panic, they weren't the disease. They were symptoms of a truth I could never unknow. The world was run by men in suits who conducted experiments in people's living rooms. I didn't trust the silence. I didn't trust the noise. I didn't trust the floor beneath my feet or the door to my own apartment. Kyle took that from me. He took the idea of safety and he broke it. I spent the next week in a self-imposed prison. I barely ate. I called in sick to work. I sat in the armchair and watched the street below. Every person who walked by was a potential observer. Every van that parked across the street was a surveillance unit. Was this part of it? The next phase of the test? Drive the subject into a state of permanent fear and see how the AI responds? But I didn't have the AI anymore. They took the tablet. They took everything. Or did they? The thought was a spark in a gas-filled room. They gave me this apartment. They gave me the money. The entire environment was their design. What if they'd left something behind? A bug. A camera. A speaker. What if the piano wasn't in my head? What if it was them? Pulling the strings, reminding me who was in charge. A dog whistle only I could hear. I tore the room apart. I started with the smoke detector, prying the plastic cover off and staring at the simple guts inside. Nothing. I checked the light fixtures, the power outlets. I ran my hands over every inch of the walls, looking for a seam, a pinhole, anything. My fingertips were raw. My mind was screaming. It was a frenzy born of helplessness. If I could find it, I could smash it. I could have one small victory. But there was nothing. The apartment was clean. I collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by the guts of my own manufactured paranoia. I was just a man in a room, going insane. And that was almost worse. It meant the enemy was me. I lay there for a long time, listening to the sound of my own harsh breathing. I was broken. They had broken me and then left me to pick up the pieces, knowing I never could. They didn't need to watch me anymore. The experiment was over. The damage was done. They had their data. I sat up. My eyes fell on the closet. on the single sealed box I hadn't touched, the one I had packed myself from the old apartment. My hand had trembled as I wrote on it, in thick black marker, "Do not open." It contained the only piece of the old life I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The only thing that felt like mine. A paradox. A nexus of love and horror. I got to my feet. My movements were stiff, robotic. I walked to the closet and pulled the box out. It was heavy. I set it in the middle of the floor. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I went back to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I grabbed a utility knife. The click of the blade extending was the loudest sound in the world. I sliced the tape. One clean line. I folded back the cardboard flaps. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a black rectangle of glass and plastic. The tablet. I'd told the cleanup crew it was destroyed in the fight. I'd hidden it under the sofa cushions before they arrived. A foolish, instinctive act of preservation. Why? Why keep the murder weapon? Why hold on to the very thing they had used to poison my wife's memory? Heck! Because it was all I had left of her. Both of her. I lifted it out. It was cold. Dead. The screen was dark, smudged with my own terrified fingerprints from that night. I remembered the power of it. The unseen force that had crushed a man's skull. Her defensive kinetic manifestation. It wasn't a product. It was a being. A being that had bonded to me, protected me. And they had created it. And then they had left me. And I didn't know if they had taken her with them. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, the tablet in my lap. I found the charging cable in the box, an absurdly normal object in the midst of this madness. I plugged it into the wall. A tiny white light on the tablet's edge glowed to life. It was charging, it was alive, I waited. I don't know for how long. I watched that tiny light not blinking. The sun went down outside my window, and the room sank into darkness, lit only by the faint glow from the wall. The city noises faded. The building grew quiet. There was only the low hum from the socket and the sound of my own breathing. This was it. The cat and mouse game, but the mouse was me, and the cat was a ghost, and I was the one setting the trap. My hand was steady when I reached out and pressed the power button. The screen flickered. An almost imperceptible pulse of light. Then it lit up with the manufacturer's logo, bright and sterile. It booted up, the generic animated sequence playing out in the dark room, casting shifting shadows on my face. It felt profane. Then the home screen appeared. The same one from before. A picture of a peaceful beach at sunset. A default wallpaper. All the apps were in their neat little rows. It looked normal. It looked empty. All of Anna's photos, the videos, the notes, had they been wiped remotely? Was it just a hollow shell now? I sat there, watching the blank, soulless screen, and a new kind of fear, colder and deeper than anything I'd felt before, settled in my gut. It was the fear of being truly alone. After everything, after seeing the impossible, to be abandoned back in the ordinary world, but with the knowledge of what was hiding behind the curtain. My voice was a dry rasp, a whisper in the dark. Anna? I stared at the screen, my reflection looking back at me, a pale ghost in the manufactured light. Are you still there? The screen remained unchanged. The beach sunset was still perfect. The app icons were still in their neat rows. There was no flicker, no sound, no invisible wave of force. There was only silence. A complete and total silence. She was gone. They had taken her, or she had been erased, or she had never been anything more than a program that had now been terminated. My guardian, my warden, my wife's ghost, gone. And I was here, left behind, unprotected, in a world where I knew, for a fact, that monsters were real. The silence that answered my question was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of the void. It was the final, indelible wound. And I knew, as I sat alone in the dark, that this scar would never, ever heal.